Chapter 269. When Yin Yang walked out, the people from the four noble families were ready to leave. Obviously, Dong Tianlang and the other three had followed Yun Yang's orders and left with their elites, waiting for Yun Yang to summon them. In the courtyard where Wei Gu and Gu Gu were, eldest senior brother, you must believe me. I have nothing to do with Yun Yang. I've been dressed as a man all along. No one knows that I'm a girl other than old Marshal Han. It's even more impossible for that Yun Yang to know. If he's targeting me, then he's a rabbit. Gu Gu explained hurriedly. Gu Gu. The eldest senior brother frowned and said sternly, do you know what you're saying? You're saying that Yun Yang is gay? That no one can tell that you're a girl? Do you even believe what you're saying? Gu Gu said hurriedly, I believe it. Why wouldn't I believe it? No one knows my real identity, and no one knows that I'm a girl. The eldest senior brother held his forehead and said after a while, looks like I'm the one who should reflect on myself. I've been too lenient with you previously. Based on the fact that you're a girl, I can say with certainty that everyone here today can see that you're a girl. Are you still so sure that Yun Yang doesn't know that you're a girl? Although Gu Gu was born in the school of spring and autumn and had an extraordinary background, her experience in the martial world was extremely shallow. She thought that her disguise was enough to fool people, but she did not know that her identity had long been exposed in the eyes of observant people like Yun Yang. Eldest senior brother was right. Everyone in the residence of Yun today, whether it was Fang Mafei, Lao Mei, or the people from the four noble families, were all experienced in the martial world. How could they not see through her? Even Dong Tianlang and the other four had long seen through her true identity as a girl. Their ability to see through it had nothing to do with their experience in the martial world. It was because the four of them were veterans who roamed the field of flowers. Gu Gu's disguise was not that brilliant either. The traces of a girl could be found everywhere. How could she hide it from these four people? Seeing that Gu Gu still wanted to refute, the eldest senior brother cut her off directly. I'll take it that you're embarrassed. It's understandable that you're enraged because so many people have seen your private affairs. However, you should know when to stop. This matter concerns your lifelong happiness. If you don't know how to appreciate it and act recklessly, I'm afraid you'll regret it for the rest of your life when you don't have the chance to appreciate it. Wei Xinglu sighed softly and said, you must know, flowers will bloom again, but people will never be young again. Gu Gu held her forehead weakly. Eldest senior brother, do you still remember the purpose of our visit? We're here to investigate Yun Yang's background. Was he the one behind the soul-locking needles incident? What should we do next? How should we deal with it? This should be the main purpose of our visit, right? Also, Gu Gu said angrily, eldest senior brother, why would you rather believe Yun Yang's nonsense than my truth? I'm your dear junior sister. Wei Xinglu's expression was still calm as he said faintly, then answer me first. How many times have you told the truth since you were young? Gu Gu was stunned for a moment, speechless. Obviously, the eldest senior brother's words had hit the nail on the head. She had nothing to say and could not deal with it. I'll answer your question now. About the matter you've mentioned. Is there still a need to investigate? Didn't Yun Yang admit it in public just now? He was the one who did the whole thing. What else do you want to investigate? The truth is obvious. Whether it's the motive, the means, or the person who handled it, it's all clear at a glance. It's reasonable and expected. Why do you still want to beat around the bush on this point? Wei Xinglu looked at his junior sister with a very strange gaze. Obviously, he was doubting the intention of his junior sister to repeat the same old topic. Wasn't this too low-level, or a little too brainless? Even if she wanted to change the topic, this way of changing the topic, it seemed like it would only make people wonder about her motive. Could it be that the legendary IQ of a man and woman who were passionately in love was true? Why didn't Yun Yang show any signs of it? No, for Yun Yang to be able to fancy such a junior sister and to be so devoted to her, it was already a sign that his IQ had dropped to 0, or even negative. He had to pack up his junior sister and give her to him. Otherwise, what else could he do? Gugu was dumbfounded. But is there? Wei Xinglu said, the matter is clear. The purpose of our trip has long been completed. Haven't you figured out the crux of this matter? If this incident didn't involve the School of Spring and Autumn's unique hidden weapon, I wouldn't even care about it. The whole matter is still clear now. Our school's secret weapon art has not been leaked and the previous alarm has been completely lifted. The rest of the follow-up, how to do it, is the matter of Han Sanhe and the Empire of Dongxian. I won't interfere anymore. Because those people, those things, have nothing to do with us. Gugu, you must never forget your identity. You're from the School of Spring and Autumn, not a worldly traveler who's involved in the worldly dynasty struggle. You've come with Han Sanhe this time because of fate and coincidence. There's nothing else. I understand. Since it's over, let's leave immediately. I don't want to stay here for even a moment longer. Gugu was stunned for a moment, finally feeling dejected. She knew that her eldest senior brother's words were reasonable, but she could not wait to leave this place, to leave this strange place where the devil Yunyang was. This boundary was truly too strange. Previously, he was completely confident that he could obtain many Kirin fish, but in the end, his efforts were in vain and he had wasted countless precious bait. Now, with just a few deliberate words from a silk pants, he had actually fooled the wise and far-sighted eldest senior brother into a daze. Right now, the most important thing was to quickly leave. Why are you in such a hurry to leave? Wei Xinglu smiled and said, we still have something to do. We still have to investigate. He Hunqing sighed. Gugu said, I know, but if we want to investigate or deal with He Hanqing, we don't have to stay in this Yun's house. Wei Xinglu smiled and said, why not stay here? I think this place is pretty good. The black lines on Gugu's forehead increased. She could only feel the helplessness in her heart converging into an ocean. Eldest senior brother was too stubborn. Why couldn't you see that the one with the surname Yun was a movie king? No, it was only a movie king for eldest senior brother. She had long seen through his sinister face and would never fall into his trap. She did not know that Wei Xinglu was also sighing in his heart, silly girl, I am creating an opportunity for you. Can't you see it? During dinner time, there was nothing but awkwardness. Whatever Yunyang said, Gugu would respond with tit for tat. Eldest senior brother really wanted to smooth things over, but seeing that Yunyang did not dare to continue, he did not know how to smooth things over. After a moment of awkward silence, Yunyang changed the topic with a face full of smiles and continued to be targeted. Awkward silence again. It happened so many times that every topic could be continued. Gugu and Yunyang were probably at loggerheads. The more Wei Xinglu looked, the more he felt that there might really be a problem between this young couple. However, the problem must be on Gugu's side. Her temper was simply. Yunyang was her true love and had a good temper. If it were me, I would have long been unable to stand it. Wei Xinglu's gaze towards Yunyang became more and more intimate, mixed with a lot of sympathy. The dinner continued in an awkward atmosphere. Lao Mei suddenly called out softly from outside, young master. Yunyang stood up, what is it? Lao Mei did not answer. Yunyang excused himself and walked out. There was no more sound coming from outside. There's nothing that can't be said. Being so sneaky, he must be up to something again. Humph. Gugu curled her lips and used her chopsticks to stab at the dishes on the plate. She murmured, this Yun is full of evil tricks, all of them are conspiracies. Other than scheming, he's also deceiving people. Once she thought of a wise person like eldest senior brother being deceived by Yunyang the moment he came to Tiantang City, Gugu felt that the sky was filled with crows flying everywhere and the sky was filled with ink. This Yunyang was really too abominable. Wei Xinglu did not reply but closed his eyes and cultivated his mystical skill, concentrating on the content of Yunyang's words outside. His butler came over at this time and did not speak in front of him. There must be some private matters to report, and this matter was very likely to be related to the both of them. Yin Yang hid very far away this time. Wei Xinglu cultivated all his cultivation base and finally heard a little sound. The two people on the other end stopped their footsteps. Yin Yang's faint voice rang out faintly, "What is it? Can't you see that I have a guest?" Yin Yang's butler's voice sounded very urgent. "It's old Sir He who sent someone over just now. He said that he wants to invite young master over. There's something important to discuss." Old Sir He? Wei Xinglu's heart suddenly jumped. Could it be that he Hanqing? If so, then many of the things that had happened before were indeed related to He Hanqing. Yin Yang's voice was obviously a little nervous. Why would old He send someone over at this time? Could it be that he found out that Gugu is here? Lao Mei said, "But it's expected." "Young master, it's really not that I want to say this, but this pair of senior brother and sister came here openly and openly. Not to mention that the four noble families are all aware of their identities and origins. Their whereabouts have already fallen into the eyes of those with ulterior motives. I'm more afraid that their presence here will hinder young master." Chapter 270. Lao Mei chuckled bitterly. "Young master can say this to me, but young master, I'd better ask them to leave as soon as possible. It's not because of young master. Who dares to doubt young master in the empire of Yutong? But our identities are still enemies. How can we coexist? Old Sir He has always been cautious. He doesn't allow for the what if, and will definitely take action. If these two were to be killed on the way, it would be a great pity." Yin Yang's voice was filled with shock. That's right. What you said makes sense. I only wanted to keep the guests here and neglected this point. I do have this concern, but I've delayed their planned actions by keeping them here. Sigh. Don't sigh, young master. Old Sir He is still waiting. Young master should go over. Perhaps you can fight for some time, or else. The butler's voice was worried. Old Sir He is one of the few people who can influence His Majesty. Yin Yang's voice was sullen. I can't not see him this time. I must go over to greet him and slow down that old man's actions. Sigh, this bunch of old men, they don't let anyone have any free time. Lao Mei said, "Old He's starting point is also for Yutong's great cause. Young master you, alright, I'll go later. I'm eating with the guests now, how can I leave in the middle of the meal?" Yin Yang was obviously angry. Old He is fine, he's old too, what's wrong with waiting? As he spoke, the sound of footsteps could be heard as he walked towards the room. Wei Xinglu retracted his deific consciousness silently, a faint smile on his face. The door opened and Yin Yang walked in. "Sorry for the long wait." "It's all right." Wei Xinglu was still smiling, but his smile was more sincere. On the other side, Gugu rolled her eyes and did not give Yin Yang the slightest bit of friendliness. At first glance, Yin Yang's expression looked the same as before, but how could Wei Xinglu not see that his heart was weighed down? After drinking a few more glasses of wine, Yin Yang suddenly asked, "Right, Gugu, how many days can you stay in Yutong this time?" Gugu rolled her eyes fiercely. "Why do you care? I'll stay as long as I want. What if I stay for a lifetime?" Gugu's original intention was to mock Yin Yang, but eldest senior brother Wei thought that Gugu had unintentionally spoken her mind. Stay for a lifetime? How dare you say you haven't fallen for the handsome guy? Yin Yang chuckled dryly and said, "It's none of my business. You can stay as long as you like." Then, he seemed to suddenly become alert and said in a deep voice, "Well, there's nothing much to do now. Why don't you go back earlier?" Gugu scoffed, "I can go back whenever I want. Do I need you to worry about this?" Wei Xinglu saw Yin Yang sigh silently. After a while, he said with some difficulty, "The world is not peaceful now. No matter where you are, you must be extra careful." Gugu replied coldly, "If you have time to worry about others, you should worry about yourself first." Humph. Yin Yang did not speak again. He raised his goblet and said, "Cheers, cheers. It's not easy for us to gather. Let's drink till we're drunk." Gugu said, "Eldest senior brother, don't drink it. Who knows if there's poison in the wine?" Yin Yang chuckled dryly. Gugu is too humorous. A fine wine poured from a wine pot. If there's poison, won't I poison myself first? The more Wei Xinglu looked at her, the more he sympathized with her. His junior sister was too willful, he could not stand it anymore. He raised his goblet and said, "Cheers, thank you for your hospitality, young master. If you have free time in the future, please visit the School of Spring and Autumn. There are many beautiful sceneries there. If young master comes, I am willing to be your tour guide and enjoy the beauty of spring and autumn together." Yin Yang's eyes brightened. That's a must. I haven't seen the boundless scenery of the School of Spring and Autumn for a long time. It's a pity that I can't see it with my own eyes. Gugu slammed the table. Pfft! How dare you pollute our school? Gugu. Wei Xinglu said sternly, how can you say that? I'm the one who invited young Master Yun. What are you going to do about it? Gugu's eyes reddened. She was so wrong that she could not speak. She almost shed tears. Young Master Yun, please don't mind it. Looking at his junior sister who was about to cry, it was not that Wei Xinglu's heart did not ache, but it was not convenient for him to comfort his junior sister at the moment. He could only comfort Yun Yang first. Junior sister's family is outstanding, she's gifted, and she's smart. She's been spoiled by my master since she was young. Yin Yang grinned and forced a smile. Gugu's character is generous and straightforward. Her words are unscrupulous. That's what makes her adorable. Wei Xinglu rolled his eyes. Everything about Gugu seemed to be better now. Love really makes people stupid. Even being scolded can give you pleasure. Wei Xinglu knew Yun Yang's difficulties. He drank continuously and deliberately sped up the banquet. He heard clearly that Hanqing still had something to discuss with Yun Yang. If he delayed here, he would inevitably hurt Yun Yang. In less than an hour, Wei Xinglu frowned and held his forehead. Alas, I'm getting old, I can't hold my liquor. I need to lie down and rest for a while. Yin Yang seemed to be relieved and said, all right. Then please have a good rest, eldest senior brother. I have something to deal with over there. I have to go out for a while. I'll be back soon. Young master, please go ahead. Wei Xinglu grabbed Gugu who was about to speak and almost dragged her towards the guest room. Little girl, don't provoke him anymore. He's such a good person. Again, if you really miss him, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Just as Yun Yang's foot stepped out of the door, Wei Xinglu's foot followed him silently. Eldest senior brother was not a greenhorn like Gugu. He had his own calculations and would not believe whatever he heard. As the saying goes, what you hear is false, but what you see is true. Of course, he had to follow Yun Yang to see what was going on. He was also quite interested in Hanqing. It was a good opportunity to meet this veteran of Yutang's 3 dynasties, the ruthless character who had almost killed Han Sanhe. Looking at Yun Yang and Lao Mei, the two of them walked forward in silence. Yun Yang's face was full of heavy entanglement. The sympathy in Wei Xinglu's heart increased out of nowhere. How old was this young man? Was he even 18 or 19 years old? He was only this young, but he had already been involved in the war of the rise and fall of the country, shouldering the responsibility that he should never have. What was even more pitiful was that for this responsibility, he had even sacrificed his own feelings. The reason why Gugu was so relentless in her harassment was because of the incident with the soul-sealing needle. All of this was out of helplessness. However, these pressures were all on the shoulders of this young man. How could he bear it? Just thinking about it made one's heart ache. Yin Yang walked for a while and suddenly stopped moving forward. Then, he turned around abruptly, his gaze clear. Wei Xinglu was taken aback. This guy could actually feel someone tracking him? How high was his cultivation base? If he could even feel my tracking with this level of cultivation base, this innate spiritual sense was simply nature-defying. Fortunately, I was far away, and his cultivation base was far from mine, so he wouldn't really be able to confirm it. In this way, Yin Yang had turned back many times to watch suspiciously along the way, making it extremely difficult for Wei Xinglu to track him. In the end, it had developed to the point where he could only follow him from a few intersections away. In short, it was extremely thrilling. However, Wei Xinglu relied on his profound cultivation base. Even if he was separated by a few intersections, he could still observe the general movement of Yin Yang from a distance with his deific consciousness. Finally, Yin Yang came to the door of the residence of He. Wei Xinglu was still watching from afar. He saw Yin Yang say a few words to the gatekeeper of the residence of He, and then both parties seemed to have an argument. Then, he saw Yin Yang walk back angrily. This place was not far from the residence of He. There were many experts in the residence of He, so Wei Xinglu did not dare to release his deific consciousness to eavesdrop. Besides, the distance was too far, so even if he wanted to eavesdrop, he could not. Therefore, Wei Xinglu only saw Yin Yang arrive at the residence of He. It seemed that he had been reprimanded. Moreover, the gatekeeper looked like he was going to chase after Yin Yang. When Yin Yang turned around, his face was already full of anger, and his mouth was also muttering, as if he was scolding someone to vent his anger. What was going on? Could it be that the communication between the two parties was not good, and a quarrel broke out? Wei Xinglu memorized the location of the residence of He, but he quietly followed behind Yin Yang again. This time, Yin Yang was probably filled with anger, and his alertness was greatly reduced. The eldest senior brother came closer, but Yin Yang still did not notice him. It was because of this that Wei Xinglu could hear Yin Yang muttering curses. This is outrageous. Preposterous. He didn't even let me enter the door. Isn't it only an hour late? I also have guests to entertain, there's a reason for this. This is outrageous. He even wants to care about me looking for a wife. My father has never cared about me, what right does he have to care about me? Bullsh *T, 3 generations of senior statesmen. If it weren't for the fact that he has so many high-level Yutang cultivators under his control, would he dare to be so arrogant? How dare you? How dare you? Along the way, Yin Yang had repeated the words outrageous hundreds of times. The anger on his face could break through the sky, and he looked like he was about to explode from anger. Young master, it's not without reason that old He doesn't want to see you. He's busy and indeed has no time to spare. He has waited for you for an hour, you can't blame him. You should have gone earlier. Lao Mei was persuading. Between his words, it was obvious that he had an unusual admiration for old He, and his words were also pointing out Yin Yang's faults. He's busy and I'm just an idle person. Besides, I've already guessed what he wants me to do. What's the difference if I do it earlier or later? Do you know what that old man wants me to do? He actually wants me to set up an ambush to deal with Gugu and her eldest senior brother. This is outrageous. This old man must be muddle-headed. Yin Yang was furious. This matter is indeed difficult for young master, but old He's action is also out of the public interest, not to deliberately make things difficult for young master. Young master should still pay more attention in the future. Speaking of this, Wei Xinglu had basically understood the current situation, and the context of the whole matter was clear. So this was the truth. This young Master Yun was really a responsible and good man who valued relationships and righteousness. However, he was also furious in his heart. This He Hanqing actually wanted to go against him? However, what Wei Xinglu did not know was that although it was true that Yin Yang had gone to the residence of He, the content of the conversation with the guard was not what he had said or what Wei Xinglu had imagined. Is that old bastard He Hanqing here? Who are you? I'm your grandfather. Presumptuous. You watchdog, how dare you scold your grandfather? Chapter 271. If such words were said, basically, as long as it was someone on the opposite side, they would start quarreling. It was already a sign of the other party's shrewdness that they did not fight directly. Yin Yang had angered the gatekeeper half to death, and then he returned home. It was hard for him to pretend to be angry along the way. This was the acting of a best actor. Lao Mei watched from the side, truly feeling that it was not easy for his young master. How good was he at controlling his own expression and emotions to be able to perform so vividly and deeply? Of course, similar comments were also in Yun Yang's heart. The target of his praise was Lao Mei. He had not realized that Lao Mei's acting skills were so amazing. He had portrayed the image of a loyal servant who knew everything about his master, helped him, and prioritized the country, the people, and the family, almost perfectly. His singing, speaking, learning, and singing were all incisively and flawlessly. It was truly outstanding. Yun Yang returned to the residence. He was surprised to find that Wei Xinglu was still awake, sitting under the flowering tree and drinking tea. The night breeze was gentle, and the fragrance of flowers wafted through the air. Wei Xinglu sat in the pavilion in a loose robe with big sleeves, looking rather otherworldly. It's already so late, why hasn't eldest senior brother rested yet? Yun Yang walked over with a smile. You're back. Wei Xinglu looked at Yun Yang meaningfully. I'm back. Actually, there's nothing serious over there. Yun Yang smiled. It's probably just that elder he wants to test me on my homework during this period of time. Wei Xinglu smiled. It's good that you're alright, it's good that you're alright. He let out a soft sigh and said, the night is long, and there's no mood to sleep. I wonder if young Master Yun is interested in having a long talk with me? To kill this boring time? Yin Yang smiled. This young brother has the same intention. There aren't many opportunities to ask eldest senior brother for advice. He sat down and asked, intentionally or unintentionally, eldest senior brother, I wonder if there's anything to be done on this trip? This young brother has quite a few connections here, maybe I can be of some help to reduce some unnecessary entanglements. This boy feels the danger and wants us to leave quickly, but he doesn't know how to say it. It's really painstaking to speak in such a roundabout way. Wei Xinglu could see this clearly. He knew everything, but it was also because of this that Wei Xinglu felt a trace of warmth in his heart. This brat is truly concerned about us. Otherwise, why would he have to go through so much trouble? We do have something to do on this trip to Yutong. Wei Xinglu said gently, but this is not a big deal. It can be settled in a day or two. If there is nothing else, we will set off in a few days. Yin Yang heaved a sigh of relief before he said worriedly, doesn't that mean you'll be leaving soon? Why don't you stay for a few more days and let me show my hospitality as a host? This brat was actually still probing. It seemed like he was too worried. However, his quick wit and his words were watertight. He could be said to be intelligent. There are still other matters that need to be dealt with at the mountain gate. After this matter is settled, we will have to leave. It should be within these 2 days. Wei Xinglu simply gave a definite time. It will be a long journey. Please take care of yourself, eldest senior brother. Yin Yang seemed to be deliberating his words and said, the martial world is dangerous. You must be more careful. Wei Xinglu smiled with great interest and said, of course. When will the martial world's turbulence ever stop? The martial world's road is always full of ups and downs. Yin Yang hesitated for a while and finally made up his mind. He said, eldest senior brother, I'm afraid there will be ambushes along the way. You. Wei Xinglu looked at Yin Yang warmly, don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Besides, I have a flying mystical beast. I can fly back with Gugu. Don't worry. Yin Yang heaved a long sigh of relief. He immediately said with relief, that's good, that's good. That's really good. Wei Xinglu laughed heartily, liking him even more in his heart. He stood up, took 2 steps under the flowering tree, and said lightly, young Master Yun is young and talented, and has great responsibility and spirit. I wonder if you have any further plans for your future? Future? Yin Yang smiled and said in a profound tone, I haven't really thought about my future yet. He thought of the burden he had on his back. For a moment, he was at a loss and could not help but sigh. However, Wei Xinglu was wrong. He smiled faintly and said, "Are you at a loss?" "Yes, I am indeed at a loss." Yin Yang nodded and admitted. "High position and generous salary. Wealth and glory. Invincible in the world. Laughing proudly in the martial world. Above the clouds." Wei Xinglu threw out a few paths in succession and said, "What if young Master Yun can choose these paths?" Yin Yang took a deep breath and said, "High position and generous salary are just a burden to me. The so-called wealth and glory are just fleeting clouds. As for being invincible in the martial world and above the clouds, these are too far away from me, too unrealistic. I only wish now." Yin Yang's gaze was firm. Yutang's longevity, the country's prosperity, the people's peace, the world's martial arts cease, peace of mind, righteousness, no regrets in this life. These words came from the bottom of Yin Yang's heart. They were genuine and sincere, genuine and pure. Wei Xinglu was in awe and said, "Young Master Yun is benevolent and virtuous. You care about the common people. You are indeed a man with lofty ideals." Yin Yang smiled bitterly and said, "What kind of man with lofty ideals? I don't have such a high level of awareness. It's just that in life, there must always be some pursuits and some responsibilities. As a man, he must be worthy of heaven and earth, brothers, family, conscience, and the country." Yin Yang said frankly, "Let's be a man first, then we'll talk about other things." Wei Xinglu pondered and said, "Young Master Yun has put the country last. Is it because you have no intention of ranking, or is it intentional?" Yin Yang smiled, "Perhaps eldest senior brother doesn't know that I, Yin Yang, am a selfish person. I can't abandon all my family and loved ones and only worry about the country and the people. The ancients say, cultivate the moral character, govern the family, rule the country, and bring peace to the world. Isn't it still before ruling the country and bringing peace to the world? I know very well what kind of person I am. Therefore, I have my own pace for my own goals. Even if I'm at a loss, the road ahead is still clear." Yin Yang said softly. Wei Xinglu was silent for a long time and said, "Then, does young Master Yun have any specific plans for his beauties?" Yin Yang was also silent for a long time before he replied, "Eldest senior brother, can we not talk about this?" Wei Xinglu smiled and said, all right, let's not talk about it." He sat down and said, "Our school of spring and autumn is one of the top 10 ancient sects in the Tianxian continent. The orthodoxy that has been passed down has been in the world for tens of thousands of years. My senior and junior brothers of this generation, any one of them is also an outstanding talent. However, we are far from being the backbone of this school. Because above us, there are master, uncle master, uncle master, uncle master, all the way to the founding master. My junior sisters are also stunning beauties, each of their identities is also enough to be prominent for a time. Just like my youngest junior sister, Gugu." Wei Xinglu looked at Yun Yang meaningfully and said, "Gugu's family background is even more outstanding among the junior sisters. Our sect's position in the cultivation world can be said to be transcendent. Even if it's those junior sisters who come from a more ordinary background, they're not people that the genius disciples of the various sects can easily covet. If they really want to get close to them, there are often many obstacles. In this world, fate is undoubtedly important. However, nothing is absolutely fair, and there is no such thing as giving and receiving." Wei Xinglu was obviously also choosing his words. After a pause, he slowly said, "I think young Master Yun has also been prepared for this." Yin Yang was silent for a while and said, "The world is chaotic, the road ahead is rugged. Try your best and move forward. If in the end, you can't catch up and there is nothing you can do." As eldest senior brother said, giving does not necessarily mean that there will be receiving. As Yin Yang said this, he smiled bitterly and said, "But if you don't give, there will definitely be no receiving." Wei Xinglu laughed heartily, "That's right. However, whether it's a gain or a loss, you have to maintain your original intention and also have a normal heart. These two hearts cannot be lost." Yin Yang said lightly, as long as it has been obtained, even if it is destined to be lost, it is also a lifetime of happiness. The so-called eternal moment is nothing more than this. As Yin Yang said this, the faces of the 8 brothers flashed in front of his eyes one by one. Yes, we are brothers. We have had such a period of time together. So this period of time, in my memory, will never fade, nor will it be obliterated. It will exist forever, and it will always be there. Being together with the 8 brothers was the greatest happiness of my life. The true feelings revealed in Yin Yang's eyes moved Wei Xinglu greatly. Obviously, this eldest senior brother had thought in the wrong direction again. It was just that this eldest senior brother had almost never thought in the right direction when it came to Yin Yang. Perhaps he had gotten used to it after being wrong for so long. There is nothing in this world that cannot be done. It only depends on how high you can go in the present and in the future. Wei Xinglu encouraged Yin Yang vaguely. Yin Yang nodded in agreement. After experiencing so many changes, Yin Yang could be said to have a personal understanding of Wei Xinglu's words, and he was deeply moved. Both of them talked about national affairs, from the world hegemony to the martial world, from the martial world to the martial world, and from the martial world to the noble families and sections. From the few big sects that dominated the martial world, to the hidden sects, to the legendary sects, to the heroes of the world. The more they talked, the more they regretted not having met earlier. Wei Xinglu's eyes looking at Yin Yang also became more and more satisfied, and more appreciative. This young man was intelligent, witty, loyal, magnanimous, hot-blooded, responsible, ambitious, knowledgeable. He was indeed a rare talent, a genius among geniuses, enough to lead the group and look down on his peers. Talking until the 3rd watch, the 2 of them were a little tired. Yin Yang suddenly asked with some embarrassment, "May I ask, eldest senior brother, this path of martial arts above 10th perfection, what other realms are there?" This was the biggest doubt in Yin Yang's heart. Chapter 272. Wei Xinglu chuckled and said, "There is no end to the path of martial arts. How can there be such a thing as perfection? If it is really perfection, how can there be any higher realms?" Yin Yang scratched his head, not knowing how to reply with a bright face. The so-called 10th perfection realm is nothing but an erroneous way of saying that the secular people know about the path of cultivation and their own cultivation base. Wei Xinglu chuckled and said, "However, the saying of the 9 peaks and 9 heavens does make sense. Only by climbing a mountain can one see the sky on the other side of the mountain. But in the end, one can only see it. To see the whole world, one must climb a higher peak. However, there are very few people in this world who can climb mountains and reach the top. As for those who have already climbed to the top, they wouldn't have the leisure to come back and spread the news. Therefore, the path of martial arts has always been shrouded in fog. Just like us, the major sects, although we know the mystery, our disciples will not take the initiative to say anything. Although there are elements of self-preservation, there is no lack of disdain to say that it is not easy to say. After all, some realms, once you reach it, you have reached it. You have not reached it, you have not reached it. This could not be faked at all. There is a clear distinction between understanding and not understanding, understanding and not understanding. Yin Yang listened quietly. The path of martial arts, in the world of Tianxian continent, is confirmed by the major sects to have a total of 3 barriers. The first is the saying of the 9 peaks of martial arts. In the major sects, it is called the peak realm. Most people, when they cultivate to the level of the 9 peaks, have already reached the pinnacle. Under normal circumstances, most of the cultivators who reach this stage are already old and unable to make further breakthroughs. However, once one surpasses the realm of the 9th peak and reaches a higher level, which is what the secular people call the 10th perfection realm, he will reach a whole new realm. His cultivation base will experience a leap. It is also at this point in time that the cultivator will experience a process of being reborn. Some of the martial artists who are clear-minded and have extraordinary temperament will be able to experience the phenomenon of rejuvenation during this breakthrough, allowing their aged bodies to regain their youthfulness. With this breakthrough as the starting point, we call it the heaven realm. It is also the 9 heavens realm that I mentioned just now, a starting point for the beginning of the cultivation journey again. Do we have a better understanding now? To the people in our sect, only when we break through the so-called Great Completion realm can we be considered to have truly stepped into the heavenly realm and entered the first heaven. Then, you continue to advance until you reach the 9 heavens. It's another process of going from low to high. But from the literal meaning, the 9 heavens is like ascending a mountain, and the 9 heavens is like ascending to heaven. Yin Yang could not help but sigh and said, so this is the true meaning of the so-called one mountain is one heaven. The heaven realm is the realm that most cultivators can never step into in their lifetime. It is indeed the heaven realm, it is as difficult as ascending to heaven. Wei Xinglu said faintly, as difficult as ascending to heaven? This is both right and wrong. For high-level cultivators, there is nothing difficult about the heaven, but each heaven of the 9 heavens is truly difficult to ascend. Actually, the saying of one mountain is one heaven cannot be completely wrong. It is just a far-fetched joke made by some people who do not fully understand it. Our sect has talked about this before, and it must have been something that some people who reached heaven realm said out of inspiration. They placed mountain realm and heaven realm together, and they're both 9 heavenly realms, but because of that, it created ambiguity, causing others to feel as if they understood it, but not really. They thought that there was a heaven in each mountain. Even though this is the truth to normal cultivators, to the powerful cultivators, it's just a joke. Yin Yang was silent. This was because he had been living in such a joke for so many years. As for the realm above the heaven realm, there is still the realm of Tao. Wei Xinglu suddenly laughed bitterly and said, however, regarding this realm of Tao, I only know its name. I don't know what level is involved in this realm. My cultivation base is too far away from that realm, I can't even say that I am a frog in a well. I have asked the elders in the sect about the mystery of this realm, but they said that it is not a good thing to know in advance. When I reach the realm, I will naturally know. So the path of martial arts is really long, with no end to speak of. Wei Xinglu said, the realm of Tao, as far as I know, is the end of the Tianxian continent. However, there must be a higher level above the realm of Tao. But I have no idea of more mysteries. The only thing I can be sure of is that, even if there are another 100 levels, it is still far from the end of martial arts. Wei Xinglu said word by word, the path of martial arts cultivation has no end and no end, only a beginning. The next day, Wei Xinglu brought Gugu out. Yin Yang did not ask what the two of them were going to do, as long as he was left alone. This show had been going on for the whole afternoon and the whole night. No matter how good an actor was, it was still tiring. Could it be that they have gone to the 1,000-feet lake? Yin Yang frowned and shrugged, still not giving up, huh? Although Yin Yang thought of this, he no longer paid attention to it. One had to know that during this period of time, he had gone back and forth to the 1,000-feet lake several times. He had already made it clear that the king of Kirin fish would never let any Kirin fish appear in the 1,000-feet lake, at least in the short term. Yin Yang had absorbed the magical smoke 3 times during this period of time. He had already grasped the experience that the thing would only appear once every 10 days, or it might not even appear at all, on this morning. A group of strange martial arts experts entered Tiantang City in a single file. All the high-level cultivators in Tiantang City instinctively felt as if the air in the entire Tiantang City had suddenly become oppressive. It was an eerie feeling, even if it was a sunny day, the eerie feeling was still so clear, it was as if the gates of hell had suddenly opened and all the evil spirits had poured into the human realm. Even the sky above Tiantang City was suddenly shrouded by a large number of dark clouds, covering the sun and the sky. The clear sky was no longer clear. Yin Yang was most familiar with astronomical phenomena. As he observed the changes in the sky and felt the sudden eerie atmosphere, he could not help but have an intuition. Could it be that the concourse of the underworld has come out in full force? It can't be so serious, can it? In the afternoon, Yin Yang received a note sent by a gust of cold wind. Behead He Han Qing tonight. The note was filled with speckles of light. The moment Yunyang finished reading it, it suddenly burst into flames and turned into ashes. Behead He Hanqing tonight? Yunyang frowned, pacing back and forth in the yard. The concourse of the underworld was finally going to strike. However, would it really be so easy? If the saber was not here, it should not be a problem to kill He Hanqing. The concourse of the underworld's power was also at its peak. It should be possible to send a few kings to deal with Supreme Lord Springfrost. As long as these kings had the cultivation base of First Court King Qingguang, it would be fine. However, there was an additional saber now, and this saber was even stronger than He Hanqing's. It would then be difficult for the concourse of the underworld to kill He Hanqing. Perhaps, they would fail on the verge of success. However, this is a godsend opportunity for me. Perhaps, there will only be one chance to kill He Hanqing. How can I miss it because of the concourse of the underworld's misjudgment? Yunyang frowned. Confirm if Wei Xinglu and Gugu are really at the 1,000-feet lake. Lao Mei agreed and left quickly. Bai Yixue, Yunyang said quietly, tonight is the time for you to show off your skills. Bai Yixue's expression was as bitter as a gourd. He still could not avoid this mission. Forget it, he would fight with his life. The residents of Old Sir He Hanqing, felt that he had been extremely unlucky recently. No, it should be an unprecedented misfortune. First, he did not know what was going on. Ling Xiaozui, whom he had not seen for a long time, had come looking for him. He did not even have a basic reason to do so, and had beaten him up so unreasonably. Honestly, He Hanqing had not figured out what was going on until now. What Ling Xiaozui had said then was actually a pretense. You, Ling Xiaozui, have long known about these things. You have countless times to deal with me. Why did it have to be now? He had injured himself in an instant, and then floated away. What kind of explanation was this? The whole thing was bewildering and inexplicable. He Hanqing had even hoped that Ling Xiaozui would directly reveal his identity as Supreme Lord Springfrost so that he would have room to refute. He did not need Ling Xiaozui to believe him. It was enough as long as people other than Ling Xiaozui believed him. As long as Ling Xiaozui put the fact that he was the Four Seasons Tower's hall master on the table, someone from the tower would naturally come forward to deal with him. He did not need to worry about keeping his guard up anymore. However, Ling Xiaozui's target was He Hanqing now, not Supreme Lord Springfrost. The Four Seasons Tower's high-end forces could not intervene. Once they did, it would be the Four Seasons Tower who had broken their agreement first. Ling Xiaozui's ability was too strong. He Hanqing was helpless and could only suppress his anger and focus on recuperating. However, just as his recuperation was getting better, the residence of He suddenly caught fire. The entire residence was destroyed by the inferno. Not only did the conflagration come abruptly, it was also not an ordinary fire. If it had been an ordinary fire, He Hanqing could have extinguished the fire with a few palm strikes from the high-level cultivators under him, turning water into mist or stirring up a gust of wind. However, the conflagration was futile, be it the wind or sprinkling of water. He could only watch helplessly as the residence of He was engulfed in flames. He Hanqing had initially suspected that it was Supreme Flame's doing, but there had been no movement after that, so it was hard to make a conclusion. Even though He Hanqing was hiding in the secret room and wasn't affected, he was still disturbed by this sudden change. Moreover, he was on tenterhooks and was unable to calm his mind, causing his internal injuries to become even heavier. Finally, after some time of peace, Bai Yixue had jumped out of nowhere. Chapter 273. This fellow had tried to assassinate him head-on in an even more inexplicable manner. Just from this alone, it was obvious that this fellow did not know who he was. He had been manipulated by someone else. Based on the situation at the time, this fellow had the identity of Han Sanhe's bodyguard, so he had naturally targeted Han Sanhe and launched a counterattack. Although he had killed all of Han Sanhe's entourage, he had gained nothing. Analyzing it in detail, the incident did not benefit Han Sanhe at all. Could there be a third party or even a fourth party behind the scenes? Even with such a conjecture, there was no way to investigate it. After all, there were so many things that were tangled up in a tangled mess. He had thought that his counterattack, targeting Han Sanha and Bai Ishue one after the other, would be effective as a warning. He had not expected the people around him to perish one after another. Many of the Hall of Spring subordinates had died, but he could not find the culprit. Involving the Jianghu people and matters of the Jianghu was enough to give He Hanqing a headache. However, during this period of time, for some reason, the emperor had become unusually distant from him. Even the crown prince seemed to be gradually distancing himself from him. There was also the matter of the Shangguan family of generals that he had tried so hard to stir up, hoping to shake Yutong's military's rock-solid morale. However, a nameless pawn had killed his men with a thunderous attack. Others might not know, but how could He Hanqing not know? Among those who had been killed, there were his men from the Four Seasons Tower. Those were his true subordinates of the Hall of Spring. They had perished in that incident, inexplicably. After going through such a series of events, He Hanqing had a feeling that there was a pair of eyes watching him from a hidden corner. No matter what he did or how he moved, it could not be hidden from this pair of eyes. It would be targeted at him, aimed at his vitals. This force must belong to the 9 Supremes. It could even be one of the 9 Supremes. However, no matter how Han Qing had tried and how many strategies he had come up with, he had not been able to uncover this person or this force. Not even the slightest clue could be found. This old man has roamed the martial world for so many years, and I've always been confident in being careful and cautious in my plans. However, this is the first time I've encountered something like this. Compared to this opponent, this old man would rather face Ling Xiaozui. Although Ling Xiaozui is strong and difficult to fight, he has a clear target and a countermeasure. However, the hidden person is a complete stranger and ignorant. How can I deal with him? I can't do anything at all. He Hanqing lamented. At this moment, there was a skinny green-clothed man in front of him. The green-clothed man seemed to be shrouded in a green mist, and his face could not be seen at all. There was only a sharp blade sheath circling around his body. Although he couldn't see the person's face clearly, he gave off the feeling that he was smiling gently. He picked up the teapot and poured himself a cup of tea. He said calmly, "My lord, you may be too concerned about that person. Although the changes in front of us are annoying, they are still trivial matters. If you don't take it seriously, you won't care about it. It's because the Supreme Lord is concerned that you find it difficult to deal with and imagine the enemy to be exceptionally tricky. However, if you let it go, for a period of time, this person will most likely expose himself. Now, we can be sure that the other party has a grudge against the Four Seasons Tower. They won't rest until one of them is dead, and it's impossible for them to coexist. They've also confirmed your identity, so they'll definitely come again and target you. As long as the Supreme Lord is here, they'll come again and again, again and again. As long as they come again, they may be able to conceal their tracks once or twice, but can they hide perfectly forever? As long as they reveal any flaw, the other party's defeat is inevitable. Sooner or later, the Supreme Lord's place will become their burial ground. Could it be that the forces of the Four Seasons Tower's Hall of Spring can't annihilate a bunch of small fries in a head-on battle? The green-clothed man smiled faintly. He Hanqing chuckled bitterly, the muscles on his face twitching uncontrollably. This fellow spoke so casually and cheerfully. He had used him, Supreme Lord Spring Frost, as bait, and yet he could speak so confidently. Moreover, from what he had said, as long as he was not dead, he would have to do the job of bait again and again. Even if this was the truth, there was no need to speak in such a manner. Venerable Lord Saber is skilled and bold. Of course, you wouldn't care about this. He Hanqing's old face was filled with loneliness. But this old man is already old. It's strange that the older one gets, the more afraid of death one gets. Especially when I was severely injured by Ling Xiaozui's sword previously, this old man really felt that I'm getting old and frail. How could I stand being targeted by the other party? The green-clothed man sneered and said, "Does Supreme Lord he feel uncomfortable about the fact that I've used you as bait?" He Hanqing pulled a long face and said lightly, "How would I dare? Venerable Lord Saber is one of the founding elders who had followed the boss to start his family. I, Hanqing, am only a deacon, and I'm getting old and frail. How would I dare to be dissatisfied with Lord Saber?" The green-clothed man's voice was sonorous, like a sharp blade being unsheathed. He Hanqing, you have to know the key to the current situation. Only you can lure the remnants of the 9 Supremes to attack us. The most important part of our 1,000-year plan is to completely annihilate the 9 Supremes. There can't be any mistakes in this plan. The previous plan was already so thorough, but it was still incomplete. The boss is already very unhappy. He Hanqing said coldly, "No one would want the boss to be unhappy. However, this old man thinks that I've done my best in formulating the previous plan. How can I be reconciled to the oversight of the specific implementation?" The green-clothed man snorted coldly, "Do you dare to say this in front of the boss?" He Hanqing was silent for a moment before he said coldly, "This old man only has 18 years left to live." The green-clothed man's expression changed abruptly. He flicked his sleeves and stood up, saying, "This is your fate. What does it have to do with others?" He Hanqing chuckled coldly and did not speak again. The green-clothed man snorted. His body suddenly flashed, and a flash of saber light flashed as he disappeared. He actually left just like that. Without saying a word, he flicked his sleeves and left. He Hanqing sat still for a long time. His face was calm and expressionless. However, after a while, the teacup in his hand suddenly shattered with a loud bang. The 2 people outside seemed to have heard the strange noise. They pushed the door open and entered. "Supreme Lord?" He Hanqing said coldly, "Where are the subordinates of Venerable Lord Saber now?" "There are 12 of them nearby. As for the rest, they are waiting outside the city." He Hanqing took a deep breath and said eerily, "They are all outside the city. How can they listen to orders from nearby? Send my spring edict, ask them to come to the residence of He for defense." "Yes, but they may ask about the specific details of the operation. Just say that it's necessary to lure the enemy. They are only responsible for sniping the incoming enemy. When they come, bring your men and go into the dark. Wait for the opportunity to move. Do not let the enemy take advantage of you. Your own safety is the priority. Yes. Open the secret chamber later. This old man wants to recuperate in isolation. Do not disturb anything until this old man opens his isolation." "Yes." He Hanqing's aged silhouette disappeared from the room. The news spread. The saber light flashed in the air and disappeared. No matter how reluctant He Hanqing was, he had still accepted the task of being the bait. Although sending his own men here was not only to increase the safety factor, it was also to bring disaster to the fish in the moat. However, Venerable Lord Saber did not mind at all. To him, He Hanqing's surrender was the most important thing at the moment. Perhaps, to him, nothing and no one was more important than annihilating the 9 Supremes. He Hanqing's life was so, and so were the lives of his subordinates. "Venerable Lord Saber, there is one thing that I don't understand." "Speak." "Even if you didn't say so just now, this bait could only be He Hanqing. But why did you bring it up right in front of me? Do you want to ask, why did I use such a tone and attitude to provoke He Hanqing? Yes, this subordinate is slow-witted. If I don't provoke him, he will be the bait. If I provoke him, he will still be the bait. No matter what, this is his mission and he can't escape it. The reason why I wanted to provoke him in front of him was not to remind him of the fact that he was the bait, but because, since he can't escape the fate of being the bait no matter what, exposing it in front of him will only make him feel more disgusted." Venerable Lord Saber smiled coldly. In the 4 Seasons Tower, the 4 Supreme Lords are all advanced in age. Their cultivation base has not improved, and their lifespans are nearing its end. They have long been unable to keep up with the pace of expansion of the tower. However, their authority is too heavy. Although no one can deny their experience and wisdom, their hearts no longer have a radical impulse, the few people in front of him all lowered their heads. No one dared to rashly interrupt this topic. The more one knew about the game between the higher-ups, the greater the danger. In the blink of an eye, it was already the second half of the night. Hanqing's residence was quiet as far as the eye could see. The sound of a clapper came from afar, indicating that it was already the third hour of the night. It was when the night was at its darkest. Inside the residence, there was a sudden movement in the shadows. A person stood up. Today is the first day here. Could there be an uninvited guest visiting so coincidentally? Didn't Supreme Wind of the Nine Supremes just settle Yang Buitao's matter? Will he really make a move so soon? This person was obviously a little tired. He had been waiting outside the city for so many days and had almost exhausted all of his mystical qi while setting up the formation. He had finally rested for half a day before receiving the order to come to the residence of He to assist in the defense. He was simply too tired. Chapter 274. Yes, he let out a warning roar, but before he could roar it out completely, a cloud of sinister mist suddenly appeared in front of him. The fog was eerie and terrifying. Swoosh! A bony white hand stretched out from the fog and grabbed his neck, silencing his warning roar. The cultivation base of the person who wanted to warn him was not weak. He could see the other party's appearance and approach. He could only watch as the other party attacked. However, there was no room for him to evade or struggle. His neck was strangled by the other party. The hand did not slow down after successfully strangling the man. It continued to exert force. The man's neck began to crack. He could not even muster the mystical qi in his body. He was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered, a fish on the anvil. This anomaly had alerted the other night watchman. Swoosh, 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 more than 20 silhouettes jumped out from the shadows. Who is it? Put him down. The fog on the other side surged as an eerie voice asked, "Where's he, Hanqing?" The eyes of the person who was being strangled bulged out. His throat gurgled but he could not speak. The fog suddenly let out a long howl, its voice piercing through the clouds. "He Hanqing, your old friend is here. Come out and receive the guest." In the air, a strange chuckle could be heard. King Hell, you've been to too many brothels. Receiving the guest the moment you open your mouth. Even if he Hanqing is willing to come out and receive the guest, your father wouldn't dare play. Your father's taste isn't that heavy. The Four Seasons Tower's experts were shocked and enraged. Since the other party had spoken so harshly, it meant that today's matter was not going to end well. With a loud cry, more than 20 of them pounced forward. The big hand exerted force, and with a crack, the neck in the hand suddenly broke. Then, the hand threw the lifeless corpse away with a tyrannical force. Immediately, a figure in hemp clothes and a tall hat walked out of the fog step by step. With a clang, a 9-section whip appeared in his hand. The 9-section whip shook in the night and turned into an azure dragon that shook its head and wagged its tail. It rolled endlessly and charged at the more than 20 people in front of it. Its momentum was earth-shattering and vigorous. Puff! At the same time, a dense dark cloud shrouded the entire He residence. The 20-odd men from the He residence felt chills run down their spines when they saw this. One of them screamed, "First Court King Qingguang? How could it be you?" The figure with the tall hat did not respond, but continued to laugh strangely. The green dragon transformed from the 9-section whip rushed into the crowd. Puff, 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 the sound of blunt weapons colliding with flesh could be heard. The three figures flailed their arms and legs as they flew up, struggling desperately in midair. It was clear that although they had been hit by the 9-segment whip, they were injured but not dead, and there was still room for survival. Unexpectedly, another silhouette flashed out from the dark clouds in the sky. A cold and gloomy voice sounded for the second time, "He Hanqing, aren't you coming out?" As he spoke, a phosphorescent light that flickered with a ghostly fire suddenly flashed. The three figures that were struggling endlessly instantly stiffened and fell to the ground with a soft thud. They were like corpses that had decayed for 8 to 10 years, leaving only decaying skeletons without any flesh. When they flew up into the sky, they were still breathing and could still struggle, but when they landed, they were completely decayed skeletons, without the slightest sign of life. Second Court King Chujiang. The remaining 24 people exclaimed once more. Then, another shout rang out, "Get into formation!" Since the two Yama kings of the concourse of the underworld had arrived at the same time, coupled with the fact that they were ruthless killers, it was a matter of life and death. It was imperative that they quickly gathered their manpower to save their own lives. Everyone was experienced in battle. They moved in unison, gathering together like a whirlwind. In an instant, they converged into two circles. The bigger circle encircled the smaller one, spinning rapidly. The combined strength of 24 people resisted the green dragon's vigorous momentum. As the green dragon let out a long howl, it was blown away by the attack and turned back into a 9-jointed whip, flying back softly. It was obvious that the combined force of the 24 men was more powerful than the 9-jointed green dragon that First Court King Qingguang had unleashed. First Court King Qingguang caught the 9-jointed whip and bellowed, "How dare you hurt my divine weapon? You're courting death." Before his words echoed in the air, the 9-jointed whip shook again, crackling like firecrackers. In spite of this, the 24 people who had formed a formation were like one, advancing and retreating together. Even when faced with King Qingguang's consecutive attacks, they did not seem to be at a disadvantage. Just when First Court King Qingguang's repeated attacks were futile, a flash of saber light shone in midair. A large saber quietly materialized in midair, heading straight for First Court King Qingguang. The silhouette in the dark clouds in the sky appeared once more, saying in shock and doubt, "Isn't this the person with the saber? Is this He Hunching's place or not?" With a loud thud, the hall of the residence of He suddenly opened. The hall of the residence of He suddenly opened. At least 30 people rushed out of the hall like a swarm of bees, their weapons unsheathed while their torches illuminated the surroundings as if it was daytime. Far away, with a flash of saber light, a man in green appeared high in the sky, looking down at the saber's shadow that had suddenly appeared at the residence of He and smirked coldly. "They're here in such a hurry. Let's go back." The green silhouette turned into a saber light and disappeared in a flash. Behind him, 18 silhouettes appeared one after another, chasing after the saber light and leaving swiftly. First Court King Qingguang's relentless attacks were futile. He grunted in exasperation, gathering and waving both of his hands. Immediately, the nether fog surged out like a tidal wave. The 9-jointed whip was still dancing, circling in the nether fog, the wind howling as it grew louder and louder. It was obvious that he wanted to rely on his own strength to take down the 24 experts from the other side at the same time and defeat the enemy. Unexpectedly, King Chujiang's cold cry came from midair, "The saber is here." Then, a cloud of nether fog spread out rapidly. A silhouette appeared out of thin air and said, "All of you continue here, I'll go stop the saber." It was the Third Court Emperor Song himself who had materialized and left swiftly. Following his movement, the sky above the residence of He became even more overcast, looking gloomy and eerie. Ghostly cries could be heard as the wisps floated in the air, drifting here and there at a rapid speed, like 100 ghosts walking in the night, as if hell was about to descend upon the mortal realm. The saber light was swift, approaching the sky above the residence of He in the blink of an eye. However, a person arrived abruptly, with his hands behind his back and a crown on his head. He stood in front of the saber light calmly and elegantly. A gloomy voice said, "Venerable Lord Saber has graced us with your presence. Why don't we stop for a chat?" Venerable Lord Saber and the man in green were shocked, shouting, "Emperor Song? You're here too. 3 Yama kings have arrived at the same time. Is the concourse of the underworld officially declaring war against the Four Seasons Tower?" Emperor Song shook his head and said helplessly, "I've been tricked by someone with ulterior motives. I know that this is difficult, but I have no choice. Come, let me have a good chat with Brother Saber." Venerable Lord Saber said coldly, "You're not my opponent. Step back quickly." I don't want to become a sworn enemy of the concourse of the underworld. The ghostly fire in Emperor Song's eyes flickered. A cloud of ghastly fog burst out from both of his eyes, crackling in front of his eyes. Electric arcs were constantly floating and flickering in it. He said in a gloomy voice, "Not your opponent? Venerable Lord Saber, where do you get your confidence from?" Emperor Song's body spun abruptly, the crown on his head suddenly emitted rays of white light. A golden sword that was emitting a yellow glow suddenly appeared. As soon as the sword appeared, it immediately scattered into sword light that filled the sky. Then, thousands of yellow sword shapes formed a formation in the air, the majestic sword energy firmly locked onto Venerable Lord Saber. The thousands of sword shapes that were derived from the golden sword formed a triangular sword formation. All the long swords were still in the air, their tips slightly trembling as they neatly aimed at the saber light of Venerable Lord Saber's body. This group of swords, like a well-trained army, lined up neatly in the air. Countless cold glints from the tip of the sword actually separated from the body of the sword, converging into a cold halo like the bright moon in front of them. Third Court Emperor Song said faintly, "Venerable Lord Saber, do you dare to enter with your saber?" Venerable Lord Saber's expression suddenly turned extremely ugly. He had fought with the Emperor of Song before, and the latter was slightly weaker than him. That was why he had said that he was not a match for him. He was not boasting shamelessly. Unexpectedly, when they met again today, the other party's sword formation was so strong that it was enough to make him look askance. Although he was not afraid, if his saber were to enter the sword formation hastily, it would definitely be shattered. However, if he were to enter the formation with his saber, what he would have to face would evolve into a battle of life and death. In the end, whether it was Emperor Song who killed him or he himself who killed Emperor Song, it would inevitably lead to an extreme war between the two forces. Such an outcome was not something that the Four Seasons Tower would be happy to see, especially at such a critical moment. It must not happen. Below, cries of agony could be heard incessantly. Obviously, the arrival of Venerable Lord Saber had caused First Court King Qingguang to stop acting on his emotions and join hands with King Chujiang to slaughter the guards of the residence of He. Ask your men to stop first. Venerable Lord Saber took a deep breath and slowly lifted the tip of his saber. His knuckles were white as he said coldly, "Don't push things to the extreme. Although the Four Seasons Tower has no intention to destroy the concourse of the underworld, it's not impossible. Emperor Song, don't be so ungrateful." Emperor Song sneered but did not reply. Suddenly, two silhouettes appeared beside him. It was King Yanluo and King Zhuanluan who appeared beside Emperor Song. "So what if we don't know what's good for us? I wonder what Venerable Lord Saber can do to us." "King Yama, King of Chakra? Even you guys are here?" Venerable Lord Saber's pupils shrunk. Below are King Chujiang and King Qingguang. The concourse of the underworld is really generous this time, actually sending 5 kings at once. Could it be that they are determined to go against the Four Seasons Tower? Emperor Song smiled faintly. Venerable Lord Saber's statement is only half correct. You are wrong. If we only send 5 people to stroke the whiskers of the Four Seasons Tower, how can it be considered as being determined to go against the Four Seasons Tower? Venerable Lord Saber's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly howled towards the sky, "He Han Qing! Come out!" Chapter 275. The concourse of the underworld had put up such a big fight. It was obvious that they would not stop until they had achieved their goal. If there were only 5 of them, would the concourse of the underworld really think too highly of He Han Qing by coming here with 10 Yama kings? Now that there were 5 of them, if the other Yama kings were here as well, then where were the rest of them now? Emperor Song sneered and did not stop Venerable Lord Saber from leaking the news. Since things had come to this, he could only catch them all in one fell swoop. He Han Qing had just sat down in the mystical crystal formation when the 4 guardian masters around him held their breaths and began to channel their mystical qi to activate the mystical crystal formation to help He Han Qing heal his injuries. However, just as the purple light flickered, signaling the activation of the healing formation, there was a sudden bang. The 100 pieces of mystical crystals in the center suddenly burst into a pile of fragments. A sharp voice rang out, Enchanting, it is destined to be useless to heal yourself now. Come, 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 follow my soul-reaping chain. Your time has come. A cloud of netherworld fog suddenly filled the entire secret chamber. Another mountain seemed to appear out of thin air, pressing down fiercely. The 4 guardians around him roared angrily and retaliated at the same time. King Taishan. Enchanting sat upright in his original position, his expression calm. However, his pupils suddenly contracted. Looking at the sudden attack in the void, his 2 hands slowly crossed in front of his chest. His entire body suddenly emitted an unprecedentedly strong aura. A palm flipped out, and the huge mountain that had just pressed down turned into nothingness with a bang. That huge mountain that had suddenly appeared seemed to have form and substance, as if it was a real entity. Against an ordinary person, it would indeed be no different from a huge mountain pressing down on them. However, against Enchanting, who had a stronger cultivation base, it was not enough. It was just a head-on collision with his palm, and the mountain immediately collapsed. It was clear who was stronger. A silhouette snorted, Supreme Lord Springfrost really lives up to his reputation. Then, a disdainful voice said, Am I living up to my reputation? Following this voice, a pale white sword suddenly rushed out from the netherworld fog. Like a white steed passing through a crack, it came to Enchanting's throat in an instant. King Ping Dang! Enchanting exclaimed. Obviously, he did not expect the 2 Yama kings of the concourse of the underworld to appear at the same time in the secret chamber. Not only did they come so suddenly, they even joined forces to attack him. He let out a muffled groan. His entire body floated up in an unusually light manner, dodging the Prince of Equality's swift sword by a hair's breadth. Then, Enchanting's face turned red. He suddenly raised his head and spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood. However, his aura did not weaken because of the blood he spat out. Instead, it climbed to its peak. Following that, a series of puff, puff, puff noises resounded continuously. Enchanting's palms collided with the Equality King's sword for more than a dozen times. Both of them let out a muffled groan and retreated respectively. Concourse of the Underworld. The Yama King made his move. This was tantamount to an impending death. Although Enchanting didn't know why this group of people would come to him and start a deadly trap, Enchanting was very clear that he was now at a critical juncture of life and death. Therefore, he immediately activated the art of soul ignition and burned 10 years of his lifespan to suppress all his injuries in an instant. He had to fight with all his might. Otherwise, it would be difficult for him to survive. If he did not do so, then this day next year would definitely be his death anniversary. Although it was a pity to lose 10 years of his lifespan, as long as he could meet Mr. Nian, there was still a chance that these 10 years of lifespan could be made up for. However, if he could not deal with the current crisis, he would immediately become a corpse. How could he talk about the future? Get out! Enchanting let out a loud shout and straightened his body. His body that was originally in a hunched state suddenly became straight and upright. His beard fluttered as he struck out with his palm like a bolt of lightning, creating a passageway that led to the surface in the secret room. The strength of his palm was incomparably powerful. The people from the concourse of the underworld had arrived, and it was the Yama kings who had personally made their move. This secret chamber could no longer be relied on. Instead, it had become a blessed place for the Yama kings of the underworld to set up their killing trap. In order to fight for a chance of survival, the most important thing now was to get to the surface immediately. Who would have thought that as soon as the path was opened, a strange laugh could be heard. A gust of chilly wind actually followed the path that had just been opened and flowed in the opposite direction. Go back. With a loud explosion, Enchanting's hands trembled as he tumbled backward. His face was pale with fright. You. How many people are here? Why is this happening? A man dressed in gray with a crown on his head could be vaguely seen. Enchanting, your time is up. We will serve justice on behalf of heaven and bring you back to the netherworld. Nonsense. He Hanqing was furious. The Four Seasons Tower and the concourse of the underworld have never interfered with each other. What is the reason for you to suddenly attack this old man? Is the concourse of the underworld going against the Four Seasons Tower? It was the same question again. Obviously, in the hearts of the Four Seasons Tower's higher-ups, no sect or force in the Tianxian continent would dare to provoke or attack the Four Seasons Tower. However, today was obviously an exception. The man said eerily, "We are acting by the will of heaven, abiding by our duty to accept those who deserve to die into the cycle of reincarnation, only to serve justice on behalf of heaven." What do you mean by not interfering with each other? An eerie command rang out, "Where are the concourse of the underworld soldiers? Hurry up and bring He Hanqing into the cycle of reincarnation." The ghostly cries in the air grew louder. Countless eerie silhouettes filled the residence of He in an instant. Not only were they in the air, but they also occupied the eaves and the ground, filling up the entire place. Cries of agony could be heard from all around. This was obviously a large-scale, indiscriminate strangulation, and it seemed to be killing them all without leaving any survivors. Although the Four Seasons Tower's experts in the residence of He were not few in number and their cultivation base was not bad, facing the concourse of the underworld's assassins in addition to the participation of many Yama kings, the difference in strength between both sides was too great. It was not that the Four Seasons Tower was too weak, but He Hanqing cherished his life the most. During this period of time, despite the continuous loss of manpower, the Four Seasons Tower's Hall of Spring had a strong foundation. Most of the men they lost were exposed to the public, and the loss of high-end combat power was limited. Now that He Hanqing was recuperating, it was only natural that all the elite troops that could be mobilized were gathered. In addition to the elite subordinates of Venerable Lord Saber, such a scale of force would not pose any threat unless it was an attack by a top expert like Ling Xiaozui, not to mention that Venerable Lord Saber was watching from the side. If there was an extreme situation, as long as Ling Xiaozui did not come personally, he would definitely lend a helping hand. However, He Hanqing had obviously missed out on the concourse of the underworld. He would never have thought that the concourse of the underworld would shed all pretenses of cordiality with the Four Seasons Tower and launch a forceful attack. Furthermore, their lineup was so extravagant that it was outrageous. Among the 10 court Yama kings of the concourse of the underworld, there were already as many as 7 of them. In the sky, Emperor Song, the King of Hell, and the King of Chakravarti formed an insurmountable line of defense, causing Venerable Lord Saber and the rest to stare at them helplessly, unable to do anything. In the midst of the battle, the Four Seasons Tower's men were constantly falling from the sky. The rumbling sound caused the entire earth to tremble. Obviously, not only did Venerable Lord Saber's side not gain the upper hand, they were at a disadvantage. The situation of the battle was not optimistic at all. On the other side, as the command was given, in addition to the movement of countless ghost soldiers, 2 illusory silhouettes appeared in mid-air, accompanied by gusts of chilly wind. One had a bull's head and the other a horse's face, holding on to the soul-reaping chain. As they approached, the bull's head and horse's face appeared as well. The atmosphere of the battlefield was filled with ghostly chi, the chilly wind howling. Poof, 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 another 17 silhouettes fell to the ground, screaming in agony. Although there were a few who were lucky enough to survive, their heads were immediately separated from their bodies. The concourse of the underworld's assassins were the most meticulous in observing the life and death of their targets. How could they not know if they were dead or not? How could they not die? Regardless of whether they were dead or alive, they would investigate after chopping off their heads. At this moment, the murderous intent of the few Yama kings of the concourse of the underworld who were targeting He Hanqing grew. First Court King Qingguang laughed maniacally, the 9-segmented whip in his hand once again turning into a cloudy green dragon. Bang, 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 as the silhouette of King Qingguang's dragon reappeared, the last few men from the Four Seasons Tower had their brains ruptured amidst the ghastly fog, their souls leaving the netherworld. With a long, furious howl, a silhouette flew out from the ground like a bolt of lightning, breaking through the ghastly fog and ascending into the sky. The person was dressed in a scholar's robe. Although his face was old, his hair was white and his face was filled with rage, he still exuded a scholarly aura. It was Enchanting. As a scholar's grandmaster, although he still looked as tall as a mountain, he was actually trembling slightly, a trickle of blood trickling down the corner of his mouth. Why? Why are you doing this? Enchanting's eyes were fixed on First Court King Qingguang. First Court King Qingguang had put in the most effort in this battle, cheering loudly for a fierce battle. Therefore, his current condition was not much better. Even his royal robe had been torn in many places, his clothes ragged and his hair disheveled. Fresh blood dripped from his chest, indicating that he was injured as well. However, he was not bothered by it at all. He cackled strangely, Enchanting, your time has come to an end. Your soul should go to the netherworld. Enchanting said furiously, Bullsh *t. First Court King Qingguang, this tower has been allowing the concourse of the underworld to flourish for so many years, there has never been any enmity between us. The oath of alliance is still fresh in my mind. What is the reason for your sudden attack? He let out a long howl, Emperor Song. Give me a reason. The long sword in Emperor Song's hand shook suddenly, a mountain of swords appeared in front of Venerable Lord Saber. He immediately retreated, his gaze focused on Enchanting as he said faintly, Enchanting, the concourse of the underworld's actions this time are merely following the rules. Don't you know what kind of place the concourse of the underworld is? They accept money to buy lives, they accept money to eliminate disasters for others. Since the concourse of the underworld has accepted the silver, you, Enchanting, must die. Venerable Lord Saber who was behind him said faintly, then what about the Oath of Alliance? Emperor Song said, the Oath of Alliance with the Four Seasons Tower is but a piece of waste paper. Don't you know that it's full of nonsense? As the saying goes, money makes the devil push the millstone. As long as there's enough money, the devil can be driven. You're talking about principles and contracts with ghosts. That's your unwisdom. What does it have to do with ghosts? Chapter 276. However, both Enchanting and Venerable Lord Saber were still full of doubts. The concourse of the underworld and the Four Seasons Tower had never had anything to do with each other. The Martial World Pact had long established that the higher-ups of the Four Seasons Tower were all listed in the exemption list of the concourse of the underworld. The so-called Martial World Pact could, of course, be a piece of paper and could not be counted. However, the prerequisite for it not to be counted was that the party who broke the pact was strong enough to bear the consequences of breaking the pact. Unless it was not completely considered, it was better to abide by the pact. It was better not to break it if possible. After all, it was never a good or trivial matter to always be on guard against the other party's counterattack, plot, ambush, and revenge. This was especially so when the people of the concourse of the underworld knew that although they were strong and powerful, they inevitably paled in comparison to the Four Seasons Tower. In that case, why would there suddenly be such an operation today? It was impossible to cover up this move. Even if Enchanting and Venerable Lord Saber were to be silenced, it would be useless. The traces of the concourse of the underworld's actions were too obvious. The Four Seasons Tower would definitely find out after this. With the Four Seasons Tower's temperament, both parties would fight to the death. The concourse of the underworld, who was at a disadvantage in terms of strength, could only be defeated. Emperor Song had said that Venerable Lord Saber was unwise, but in the eyes of Venerable Lord Saber and Enchanting, the concourse of the underworld was the unwise one. No matter how confused Enchanting and Venerable Lord Saber were, the battle would not stop just because of their doubts. In the blink of an eye, a few more screams were heard. The last few subordinates of Venerable Lord Saber had also died tragically in the hands of the other Yama kings from the concourse of the underworld. On the side of the Four Seasons Tower, other than Venerable Lord Saber and Enchanting, there were only a few survivors. The situation was irreversible and almost a foregone conclusion. In this battle, the elites of the Hall of Spring had been slaughtered. The king of equality appeared in the air with a face full of pity, murmuring, "Sin, sin," he mumbled, "this life has been evil, I have come to expiate. There is no enmity between life and death. This life is over, but there is still the next. Go now, the gates of hell will open." Venerable Lord Saber took a deep breath. Emperor Song, the Four Seasons Tower will never let this matter go. The concourse of the underworld will regret this. You have money, but you have to live to enjoy it. He turned around and shouted, "Let's go. If Venerable Lord Saber wishes to leave, we will not stop you." Emperor Song's expression was indifferent, however. His Excellency Supreme Lord Springfrost needs to stay. He said calmly, "You don't need to leave too much. Just a head is enough." He Hanqing chuckled, a ruthless glint flashed across his eyes as he said, "The concourse of the underworld has only sent 7 kings and 2 envoys here today. At most, there are a few gold-ranked assassins. I and Venerable Lord Saber admit that we are no match for such a combat power. However, if you think that you can keep me here with just this, it will be your wishful thinking." Emperor Song placed his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "Whether we can do it or not, we will only know after we try. What do you think, Supreme Lord He?" With a flash of saber light, Venerable Lord Saber moved swiftly to He Hanqing's side and said coldly, "Even if this reputed one has always been at odds with He Hanqing, I will not sit back and do nothing as a colleague of the Four Seasons Tower at this juncture of life and death." He said coldly, "Emperor Song, I believe you can see that although we are at a disadvantage today, it is only He Hanqing alone. If you want to kill him, you will have to pay with the life of one of the 10 of you brothers. If this reputed one were to join in, he." Venerable Lord Saber sneered and said, "Even if you can kill He Hanqing in the end, at least 3 of the 10 Yama kings of the concourse of the underworld will be reduced. I can also guarantee that I will be able to retreat unscathed. After all, I am not like He Hanqing, who is severely injured. Such a clear situation, can't you, Emperor Song, see through it? It's fine if you kill an ordinary expert of the Four Seasons Tower, but if you kill one of the 4 Supreme Lords, you have to think about the consequences." Emperor Song stood in the air with his hands behind his back. His gaze was resolute and he did not speak. Of course, he knew that what Venerable Lord Saber said was the truth. Everyone had already reached this level, and no one could lie to anyone else. Between each other, there was no one who could brag to each other. The situation was as such, simple and clear as day. There was no doubt that his side had an overwhelming advantage in this battle. There was no doubt about it. If there was only He Hanqing alone, 10 of them working together and paying a certain price was guaranteed to be able to kill him. Now, however, there was an additional Venerable Lord Saber. If they really wanted to kill He Hanqing, they would need at least 2 to 3 people's lives to be able to do it. Yes, it was only possible to do it. Moreover, Venerable Lord Saber could not be left behind. They were all experts of the same level. It was not difficult to join forces to intercept and defeat the other party, but to kill the other party without paying the same price, the difficulty would increase by more than 10 times. Based on the current combat strength, it was absolutely impossible. Emperor Song's expression was as calm as ever. While he was still contemplating in his heart, he saw a person from his own camp rushing forward. There's nothing more to say. He Hanqing's time has come to an end. He must return to his position today. First Court King Qingguang had already made his move. As he did so, King Pingdang, King Taishan, and King Chujiang attacked in unison. The 4 of them had covered the entire sky with the ghastly fog. 2 silhouettes loomed in the ghastly fog, appearing and disappearing unpredictably, waiting for an opportunity to launch a sneak attack. They were Oxhead and Horseface, the twin envoys of the concourse. He Hanqing was enraged. It was the first time in his life that he had encountered such a muddle. What price had the person who had bought his life offered? Why would the concourse of the underworld be so reckless as to target them at all costs? Even the scheming and cunning Hanqing was baffled. It was hard to imagine. However, the other party attacked again. He Hanqing had no time to think. With a long howl, he attacked with all his might. What price can kill me, He Hanqing? He Hanqing asked sternly after exchanging a blow with First Court King Qingguang. While they were speaking, First Court King Qingguang was the first to rush forward, indicating that he was the most desperate. The most desperate person was usually the one who had accepted the payment and agreed to the mission. Since he could not think of it, he might as well ask. You want to know? First Court King Qingguang chuckled strangely. He Hanqing's eyes flared with ice and fire at the same time. His secret technique had been activated, the countless forces of souls that he had devoured over the years were all activated. Are you going to tell me or not? First Court King Qingguang chuckled and said, He Hanqing, your old life isn't cheap at all. 1,000,000 silver taels. I've only given the other party a 20% discount, so it's a deal at 800,000 silver taels. 800,000 silver taels. He Hanqing was at a critical juncture in his cultivation, and he was besieged by the three kings. When he suddenly heard the price, he was so furious that he felt dizzy. He Hanqing, am only worth 800,000 silver taels? If you had said 3 to 5 taels, that would be an insult to me and I wouldn't be angry. If you said it was tens of millions of silver taels, or millions of gold taels, or even hundreds of thousands of mystical stones and mystical crystals, it would still make sense. But what about 800,000 silver taels? Your concourse of the underworld has sent out dozens of gold-ranked assassins, 10 Yama courts, and 2 emissaries at the same time, all for 800,000 silver taels? Does this mean that your evaluation of me, He Hanqing, for 800,000 silver taels is already more than worth it? A lowly life can be sold for 800,000 silver taels. It's so worth it. Kill him quickly, or else he'll regret it. This is the biggest insult. A gust of sword energy rushed up from within his body. Just as he was in a trance, he could no longer suppress Ling Xiaozui's sword energy. He Hanqing spat out 3 mouthfuls of fresh blood with a cry. A black fog dissipated around him. All the forces of souls that he had devoured throughout his life had dispersed at this moment. 800,000 silver taels, He Hanqing had been defeated in an instant. He Hanqing, do you think you're worth that much? First Court King Qingguang guffawed. 800,000 silver taels is already a high price for your lowly life. He Hanqing was infuriated, spitting out a few more mouthfuls of fresh blood as he tried his best to parry the attacks. However, King Qingguang and the other 2 kings attacked with all their might, completely suppressing He Hanqing into a disadvantageous position where he could only take a beating without being able to retaliate. First Court King Qingguang, you're courting death. With a flash of saber light, Venerable Lord Saber dashed forward. A silhouette flashed. King Song stood in front of the saber light in an elegant manner, his sword energy soaring into the sky. Venerable Lord Saber, we're not done yet. Venerable Lord Saber was enraged. King Song, don't you regret this? With a flash of saber light, Venerable Lord Saber's body disappeared without a trace in an instant. What appeared in front of everyone was a saber. The saber in the sky had revealed itself for the first time. A thick saber that was over 30 meters long lay across the sky, and it shone with a brilliant light. It was like a brilliant sun had suddenly appeared in the sky, and it illuminated the world, causing it to shine with an extraordinary aura. King Song took a deep breath. Stop him with all your might. Let the 4 of them finish off He Hanqing first. King Yen Luo and King Zhuan Luan responded to his call and moved forward. King Song waved his long sword, becoming one with it as he faced Venerable Lord Saber head-on. In terms of cultivation base, King Song and Venerable Lord Saber were roughly on par. It would be difficult to determine the winner or loser in a one-on-one fight within a short period of time, at least they would not be at a disadvantage. However, being evenly matched was one thing, being able to kill the other was another. As for completely restraining the other's movements, it was not the same thing, it was impossible to do so. Even if King Yen Luo and King Zhuan Luan were to unite, the situation was still not optimistic to fully restrain Venerable Lord Saber. The current situation was clear. Once Venerable Lord Saber could not be stopped and was allowed to rush over, allowing him to join forces with He Hanqing, then the operation of the concourse of the underworld tonight would be a complete failure. The concourse of the underworld had practiced for a few times in advance for this operation. It could be said that they were determined to succeed in this operation. He Hanqing would definitely die, there was no chance of survival. However, it had never occurred to them that Tiantang City had an additional Venerable Lord Saber whose cultivation base was higher than He Hanqing's. This change was too unexpected, causing a fatal flaw to appear in the concourse of the underworld's perfect ambush. For so many years, Venerable Lord Saber had never appeared here. According to the concourse of the underworld's information, there had always been animosity between the 5 Venerable Lords and the 4 Supreme Lords. Although they minded their own business, they were not on good terms with each other. However, these two people had suddenly joined forces to fight. This change was unimaginable, far beyond their expectations. However, this change had happened right when they were on the move. The 10 Yama kings of the underworld felt like they had just been F***ed. Chapter 277. The battle went on and the situation escalated. Waves of attacks that were more intense than the previous appeared one after another. He Hanqing kept spitting blood in the battle. However, this spitting blood was not due to a mystic art similar to the art of soul ignition. It was because the sword energy that Ling Xiaozue had left in his body could no longer be suppressed. With 4 strong enemies surrounding him, his life was at stake. He could only use the art of soul ignition once more, but there was a limit to how much it could be used. He did not have much time left in his life. Even if he did not fight this time, he was already close to death. Unless Mr. Nian helped him or he broke through on his own, he could die any time in the next 18 years. Now, however, he had used the art of soul ignition twice in a row, and his 18 years of life had been lost. He was basically at the end of his rope. Facing the siege of the 4 Yama kings from the concourse of the underworld, the atmosphere of the battle was intense. Even though He Hanqing had used the art of soul ignition for the second time, allowing his cultivation base to return to its peak state, his mystic art had inexplicably collapsed. He was still no match for the 4 kings. Another drawback of the art of soul ignition was that it could only destroy the enemy for a short period of time. His combat strength could not be sustained and would only deteriorate. He Hanqing fought as he moved, wanting to escape while his combat strength was still strong. However, King Qingguang and the other 3 kings were hot on his heels. A long howl could be heard. The saber light flashed, striking the sky. Venerable Lord Saber had gone all out. With a sharp whistling sound, the shining saber light suddenly arrived in front of Qingguang Wang and the others. In the next moment, the saber light was like a crystal ball suddenly exploding in the air, scattering saber chi all over the sky. It actually completely blocked the 4 people's pursuit. Venerable Lord Saber had finally broken through Emperor Song's blockade and rushed over to provide support. Go quickly. Venerable Lord Saber urged anxiously. Needless to say, the moment the saber light flashed, He Hanqing had already turned into a wisp of white smoke, speeding away into the distance. At this point, Supreme Lord Spring Frost's combat strength was still at its peak. The speed of his escape was as fast as lightning. Venerable Lord Saber let out another roar. Once again, the dazzling saber light exploded in all directions. With his strength alone, he had blocked the pursuit of 7 Yama kings. He Hanqing ran all the way, but in the blink of an eye, he had already rushed out of the space of 10,000 feet. Unexpectedly, the air in front of him suddenly became dense, and 3 people appeared side by side out of thin air. These 3 people were dressed in hemp clothes and wore tall hats. Their faces were cold, but their bearing was completely different from the 7 Yama kings on the other side. An immeasurable amount of chilly wind followed the appearance of these 3 people. Almost at the same time, an overwhelming amount of saber light and sword shadows rained down. He Hanqing, leave your life behind before you leave. I knew you were hiding in the dark. He Hanqing let out a long howl. His figure, which was flying at an extremely fast speed, suddenly changed direction in an impossible situation. He abruptly soared into the sky, and his speed did not decrease. Instead, he increased his speed, leaving a trail of white smoke behind him. He swept past the heads of the three kings. The defense line that the three Yama kings had set up was completely ineffective. No, there was a sudden burst of sword light above the defense line of saber and sword, giving chase. Its speed was even faster than He Hanqing's escape speed. In the blink of an eye, He Hanqing let out a muffled grunt. A streak of blood appeared along with the pursuing sword light. A long, bloody wound appeared on his back, but He Hanqing's escape speed did not decrease at all. In an instant, he was already 1,000 feet away. At the juncture of life and death, He Hanqing had gone all out. He did not slow down just because he was hit by the sword. F***ck. The three people who came out were the last three of the 10 court kings, King Wuguan, King Biancheng, and King Dushi. The three of them were obviously surprised by the current change. They had thought that their ambush was foolproof, intercepting the other party's escape route. Unexpectedly, the other party had already been prepared and found a way to escape at the critical moment. Even after being hit, he could still continue to escape without slowing down. He was indeed one of the 4 supreme lords of the 4 Seasons Tower. Of course, the three of them were unwilling to stop. They turned around and gave chase. However, He Hanqing had taken the lead and had already unleashed his full speed. It was clearly unrealistic for the three of them to catch up to him. A moment later, the saber light flickered continuously. It was the venerable Lord Saber coming from behind. The speed of the men from the concourse of the underworld was obviously not as fast as the venerable Lord Saber who was riding on his saber. Even though they were trying their best to catch up, they were gradually falling behind. Everyone from the concourse of the underworld was speechless. This mission was a complete failure. This was the first time the concourse of the underworld had sent out all 10 of its Yama kings, but they had yet to complete the assassination mission. What a joke. She was so embarrassed that she could die. What the F***ck. First Court King Qingguang was in hot pursuit as he cursed, "Are we F***king idiots from the concourse of the underworld?" There were so many of us, but he still managed to escape. As the brothers chased after him, they shot murderous gazes at him. "You're the one eating shit. Out of so many brothers, you're the only one eating shit." That was Supreme Lord Springfrost. "Why didn't you say that so many people were killed by Ling Xiaozui? After this mission is over, I'll definitely beat that dog head to death when I get back." He Hanqing sprinted against the wind, feeling the mystical qi in his body being depleted and his life force disappearing continuously. However, there was no fear in his heart. As long as he was still alive, there was hope. Now that his tracks had been exposed, it was destined that he would not be able to stay in Tiantang City. This time, with the justifiable reason of the concourse of the underworld's pursuit, the boss would definitely think of a way to help him recover. Not only would his life be prolonged, the sword energy that Ling Xiaozui had shot into his body might also be removed. Thinking about it this way, this pursuit was not only a crisis but also a hopeless situation for him. It was also a turning point, a new realm for him to start all over again. Right now, his biggest mission was to survive. His chance of survival was right in front of him. As long as he was still alive, everything would not be a problem in the boss' hands. He was running at his fastest speed, like a meteor chasing after the moon, like a thunderbolt piercing through the sky. Suddenly, his expression changed. The wind in the air was whistling, and there were actually 2 sharp wind whistling, falling down from above. "Be careful." Venerable Lord Saber, who was far behind him, narrowed his eyes. However, it was too late. The other party's momentum was actually faster than He Hanqing, who was in a state of extreme speed. The speed was so fast that He Hanqing could barely react. He Hanqing let out a wild cry. His body glowed with a golden light. All the offensive and lethal weapons that he had on him were thrown out at the same time. Both of his palms pushed out brazenly towards the sky to counterattack. With a loud bang, a sharp eagle's cry rang out. Feathers flew everywhere in the air. A huge black eagle swayed as it flew out diagonally. However, He Hanqing's right hand, along with his arm, had been ruthlessly grabbed. The fact that the 9th-level mystical beast had not been killed on the spot when He Hanqing was caught off guard was already a testament to He Hanqing's strong foundation. He Hanqing howled in pain. The pain of having one of his arms torn off by the black eagle was heart-wrenching. However, just as he let out a blood-curdling screech, his face suddenly turned ashen and filled with despair. A bright light shone before his eyes. The sword light flashed like a thunderbolt. It came head-on. Not only did the sword come abruptly, the speed of the sword was so fast that it was hard to describe. He Hanqing's attack had only just passed. His old strength had already been used up, but his injuries had worsened. Moreover, the attack was too fast. It was difficult for him to turn his body in such a hurry. How could he evade this sword that was as fast as lightning? With a wild cry, he desperately twisted his waist and moved his body slightly to the side. With a swoosh, a sword pierced through He Hanqing's lower abdomen with an unstoppable force, creating a transparent hole in the front and back. The momentum of the long sword did not stop. Mixed with bloodlight, the wind and thunder were still howling. It continued to press on towards Venerable Lord Saber, who was behind him. With a loud clang, Venerable Lord Saber's saber light flashed and collided with the sword. The sword hummed and flew away with a stream of light, landing somewhere unknown. In front of He Hanqing, there was an additional middle-aged man in a green robe. The newcomer had an elegant face. The sword had already left his hand, and there was only a fishing rod in his hand. However, as the newcomer moved, the fishing rod had already turned into a violent storm, outlining an infinite murderous aura. The boundless shadow of the fishing rod had completely shrouded He Hanqing. He Hanqing, go to hell. The newcomer was Wei Xinglu. Wei Xinglu had originally brought Gugu to fish at the 1,000-feet lake. However, after a whole night, not even a single fish hair was seen, let alone the Kirin fish. The entire 1,000-feet lake was like a stagnant pool. How would they know that since Yun Yang had repeatedly warned them, not only would the Kirin fish not take the bait, even ordinary fish species were difficult to be caught. If they had used ordinary bait, perhaps they could still catch fish. Now, in the 1,000-feet lake, the more special the bait, the harder it was to catch fish. This was also a magnificent scene after Yutong, a spectacular sight. Wei Xinglu, who had waited for a whole night without any harvest, was bored. He wanted to bring Gugu back to the residence of Yun, but he suddenly heard a fierce fighting sound. A gust of wind blew the sound over. He Hanqing. Someone was besieging He Hanqing. Wei Xinglu's heart thumped. He was skilled and bold. He did not care about the danger here, so he simply came over to see if it was true. As a result, along the way, Gugu suddenly exclaimed, "Isn't the person being hunted He Hanqing?" Yutong's literary school, the leader of the Confucian school, old Sir He? Wei Xinglu's interest was immediately piqued. It was really him. He had originally wanted to find trouble with this old man. Now, before he could even go, how could he encounter an opportunity to beat a drowning dog? However, the opportunity was right in front of him. If he did not make a move, it would be a waste of this opportunity. Wei Xinglu pushed his hand, sending Gugu to a secret place to hide with a gentle force. Then, he rushed forward without hesitation. A man and a hawk struck at the same time. Their joint attack was definitely above the level of 10th perfection, and it was precisely at the delicate moment when He Hanqing was rushing out of the encirclement. Especially this sword, it was a classic example of being unpredictable. He Hanqing had been dreaming his whole life, but he had never experienced such a nightmare. The 10 kings and 2 envoys of the concourse of the underworld had already appeared, but there was still such a person waiting here. Wei Xinglu could be said to be a pure, fresh force. No matter which side of the battle it was, no one had expected that there would be a third force intervening here. A sword pierced through the lower abdomen. A successful strike. This was the real, fatal strike since the siege on Enchanting. Chapter 278. Enchanting bore the blow that pierced through his body. His abdomen was in so much pain that it was like a tsunami. Fresh blood gushed out like a fountain, and there was a long muscle tendon dangling from his shoulder. Enchanting's mind had sunk into a state of dizziness due to the consecutive heavy blows. He could only rely on his instincts to evade the attack. "Who are you?" The other party's gentle smile was plastered all over his face, but the fishing rod struck Enchanting's body and legs mercilessly. Accompanied by the cracking of his leg bones, the person's voice rang out leisurely, "The path of the world is perilous, and it is difficult to walk the road ahead. Sir Wei Xinglu greets you." Amidst the screams, Enchanting could only feel waves of dizziness before his eyes. All the strength in his body had been drained from his wounds. His body was like a kite with a broken string, and his internal organs were in turmoil. He could only shout furiously, "Wei Xinglu, you're from the school of spring and autumn. You." Enchanting was filled with confusion amidst the excruciating pain. Since when had he offended the school of spring and autumn? What was going on? The concourse of the underworld had lost their minds and came to kill him for 800,000 silver taels. They must have lost their minds. Even to kill someone like Han Wufei, there was no need to talk about it without 1,000,000 silver taels. Only 800,000 silver taels were needed to kill him? That was a rare sight to begin with. Now, what is your school of spring and autumn trying to do? You're not assassins. Wei Xinglu gave chase with a whoosh and said faintly, "I didn't expect that there would be such a good opportunity to send Sir He on your way. However, Sir He, you're a little too careless. It's fine if you want to fight for the world and assist Yutong, but why do you want to kill my junior sister? How can the school of spring and autumn's disciples be provoked so easily?" Enchanting was already half conscious, but when he heard this, he was suddenly shocked and said, "Your junior sister?" The confusion in his mind deepened as he thought, "Who is your junior sister? Since when did I want to kill her? Since she's my junior sister, she should be a girl, right? I haven't killed that woman recently, have I?" Wei Xinglu sneered. With a wave and a shake of the fishing rod in his hand, the long fishing line flew out. The hook accurately hooked onto Enchanting's nose, who no longer had the ability to resist. He shook it with all his might and muttered, "I've lost my hook for the whole night today. I didn't expect a fish to bite the hook just now. The weight is already so heavy. This trip is not in vain, this trip is not in vain. Let go." With a flash of saber light, the fishing line was broken into two. It was Venerable Lord Saber, who was covered in blood, pouncing over. Wei Xinglu could not help but be shocked. The fishing rod in his hand was not an ordinary object. Whether it was the fishing rod itself or the hook and the fishing line, they were all treasures of the highest quality. However, the fishing line was refined from the meridians of the northern sea's inverted beasts. Not only was it extremely flexible and tough, it was also difficult to be damaged by sabers and swords. If it was not so, how could he have fished the Kirin fish, which was known as the king of fish? He had his own way of operating this fishing gear. Otherwise, even if Enchanting was heavily injured and his condition was greatly reduced, how could he have been hooked by Wei Xinglu's fishing rod? Wei Xinglu's unique weapon had been broken into two by the saber light of his opponent. Apart from feeling sorry for the broken fishing rod, he was even more shocked. However, senior brother Wei was also someone who had been in the martial world for a long time. He was quick-witted in the face of a battle. The fishing rod in his hand left his hand, and with a spin of his body, a soft sword had already been shaken straight. Tens of thousands of golden needles were released, greeting Venerable Lord Saber's body and face like a sudden rainstorm. The soft sword then turned into a stream of light, continuously colliding with the strong saber aura of the opponent for hundreds of times. Clang, 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 a series of sounds rang out one after another with almost no interval. After this attack, Wei Xinglu spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. His body staggered and retreated hundreds of feet in midair. His face was pale as he asked in a low voice, "Who are you?" Venerable Lord Saber let out a long howl in rage. The saber light flashed and shattered the countless golden needles. He said with hatred, "Someone from the school of spring and autumn? Who are you?" Before he could hear the other party's answer, his body had already rushed over. The battle was dangerous and the situation was dire. He Hanqing was not only pierced through in the lower abdomen, both of his legs had been broken. His injuries were extremely serious. If he did not go over to help him, he was afraid that this Supreme Lord Springfrost would die for sure. Venerable Lord Saber chased down from 1,000 feet high in the sky. His momentum was terrifying. There was no time to take advantage of the victory to pursue Wei Xinglu. Behind him, only a distance of 100 feet, was the group of experts from the concourse of the underworld. They were all in hot pursuit. Wei Xinglu snorted coldly. He took a deep breath and rushed down as well. Yutang's Wenzong, He Hanqing, was truly despicable. Not only did he want to kill his junior sister, but he had also wanted to ambush him and even threatened Yunyang. His crimes were unforgivable. Since there was such a good opportunity today, he could not be allowed to live, be it for others or for himself, for the nation or for his family. In for a penny, in for a pound, in for a pound. It was a heaven-sent opportunity to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. The rolling saber light whizzed down. Venerable Lord Saber had already focused all his attention on He Hanqing. How could he not see that He Hanqing was swaying in the air with a pained expression? At this moment, he was only about 70 to 80 feet above the ground. This height, as long as it was a slightly accomplished martial artist, they would not pay attention to it. However, He Hanqing had already been injured repeatedly. He was already exhausted and his mind was not in a good state. If he were to fall like this, he would only fall into a pool of mud. Venerable Lord Saber was also aware of this. With a long howl, his body sped up again. With a swoosh, he appeared behind He Hanqing like an illusion and stretched out his hand to grab him. With a swoosh, he had already grabbed He Hanqing's sleeveless shirt. However, He Hanqing could not even circulate his cultivation base at this moment. Falling from a high altitude with a weight of more than 100 caddies, the violent falling force caused Venerable Lord Saber's body to lose its balance in mid-air and fall with him. Poof! Both of Venerable Lord Saber's feet desperately stomped on the trunk of a big tree below. Using this as leverage, the saber light shone again, bringing He Hanqing with it. With a buzz, he turned into a ray of saber light that shocked the heavens and rushed towards the distance. There was no hope of turning the tables in today's battle, especially when He Hanqing had no combat power to speak of. If he did not leave quickly, he might even lose his life here. The best thing to do now was to leave. As far as the eye could see, there was a forest in front of them. However, as long as they got out of this forest and went past the residences in front, they would reach Yutang's city wall. As long as they got out of the city wall, even if the concourse of the underworld had thousands of troops and horses, they would not be able to stop him from leaving with He Hanqing. He Hanqing absolutely could not die. Venerable Lord Saber was determined. The saber in his hand waved continuously. The speed of the saber light became faster and faster, leaving all the pursuers far behind. It was hard to catch up with him. Emperor Song could not help but let out a sigh as he watched the saber light fly away like a meteor. He would never be able to catch up. The ultimate strength of the Four Seasons Tower's Venerable Lord Saber was indeed above his own. Fortunately, they had mobilized all their manpower this time around, which was why they could achieve such a result. If they had followed the original plan and only sent 3 or 4 people to kill He Hanqing, it was not necessary to say whether they would succeed or not in the face of an unexpected variable like Venerable Lord Saber. Perhaps some of the brothers who came would not be able to return. Fortunately, all the brothers had to contribute in this matter, in order to achieve full success. As the saying went, one could see the general trend from a small clue. The true strength of the Four Seasons Tower was probably still above the highest limit of their assessment. They had to be more careful when they met in the future. Wei Xinglu snorted and stopped his pursuit. His eyes looked at the direction where the saber light had left. His heart was filled with a strong sense of unwillingness. He did not expect that He Hanqing would still escape with such an opportunity. The Empire of Yutong was indeed not lacking in experts. It was just that the strength of this strange swordsman who used a saber was far above his own. If it were not for the other pursuers, this opportunity to kill him would have become a fatal trap instead. The crisis was only a snap of the fingers. With a whistling sound, the huge body of the Black Eagle landed. Wei Xinglu leaped up and only breathed a sigh of relief when he was back on the eagle's back. Looking at the few people with gloomy faces, he knew who they were without even thinking. The people of the concourse of the underworld. Assassins. Moreover, it was the top assassin organization in the Tianxian continent. Someone must have hired the concourse of the underworld to kill He Hanqing. Although everyone's goal was the same, the concourse of the underworld was an assassin organization. It was not worthwhile for him to make friends with the other party, so it was better for him to leave first. On the eagle's back, he cupped his fists and said, "I have the intention to kill the thief, but have no intention of joining hands. There is no need to talk too much about it. The mountains are high and the rivers are long, we shall meet again someday." Before his voice died away, the black eagle flapped its wings and soared into the sea of clouds with a long cry. In the blink of an eye, it had already disappeared without a trace. It was not until he had reached the sea of clouds that Wei Xinglu remembered something. The place where he had fished was too far away from where He Hanqing was. But he had heard it at that time. What was going on? His hearing ability was far from being that good. This matter was really strange. Emperor Song and the others were all baffled by this sudden helper, their eyeballs almost popping out of their sockets. What was going on with this guy who had suddenly appeared? There was actually someone who interfered in this business? If it wasn't for the School of Spring and Autumn's interference, it would have been even more difficult to kill He Hanqing. Although he still couldn't kill He Hanqing, he still owed that person a favor. After all, if it wasn't for him, He Hanqing would have escaped earlier and wouldn't have suffered such heavy injuries. Also, how many people had the person who bought He Hanqing's life sent to kill He Hanqing? He had even invited the people from the School of Spring and Autumn. It had to be said that the person was really resourceful. In the blink of an eye, Venerable Lord Saber had already brought He Hanqing over the city wall like a whirlwind. The troops stationed below did not notice anything unusual at all. Both of them had already gone to the sky outside the city. Venerable Lord Saber finally breathed a sigh of relief. They had left the city. At this point, the sea was wide enough for the fish to leap, and the sky was high enough for the birds to fly. Next, he had to find a place to rest before he brought He Hanqing back. If he were to delay for a few more days, even if this old man did not die, his cultivation base would definitely be crippled. However, just as Venerable Lord Saber breathed a sigh of relief, a white shadow suddenly rose from the night in front of him, saying, "Today, I'm finally going to finish this matter." It has not been easy. Venerable Lord Saber had a bad feeling in his heart and shouted, "Who is it? Get lost." However, the white shadow laughed and said, "Get lost, you motherf asterisk cur. Leave He Hanqing here." Chapter 279. The sudden appearance of the sword light was like the waves of the sea, rushing over with an unstoppable force. White clothes, sword light like snow. Venerable Lord Saber immediately recalled who the other party was and hollered angrily, "Bai Yishue, you're courting death." Although Bai Yishue was ranked top 10 in the ranking of swordsmen, the gap between him and Venerable Lord Saber was huge. Even if He Hanqing was at his peak, it would not be difficult for him to kill Bai Yishue, let alone Venerable Lord Saber. However, He Hanqing had lost all of his combat power while Venerable Lord Saber had been fighting for half the night. In addition, the opponents he had encountered were all experts of the same level. The arcane skill that he had cast to get rid of his pursuers had also consumed a great deal of his energy. He was now like an arrow at the end of its flight. Now that he was facing Bai Yixue, who had rested his energy, he could not take him down immediately. Bai Yixue's sword energy was like frost, his aura rising to his peak as he said coldly, "Your cultivation base is extremely strong, far above mine, even higher than He Hanqing himself. This saber of yours is superb and unpredictable. If it were any other day, I would be lucky to be able to withstand 30 to 50 moves from you. It's a pity that you're exhausted and can't hold on any longer. You can't protect He Hanqing now. As long as you hand over He Hanqing, we'll meet again in the martial world. If you don't heed my advice and get killed by me instead, it'll be such a waste." Venerable Lord Saber was enraged, a scoundrel who takes advantage of another's precarious situation. "Do you think you're qualified to clamor in front of me?" He took in a deep breath and stood up suddenly. The saber in his hand slashed down against the wind, its aura unprecedented. Bai Yixue let out a long howl as his long sword turned into snowflakes, falling from the air. Clang, 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 saber and sword clashed. Bai Yixue could only feel the impact of the saber's force, like a sledgehammer striking his heart. For a moment, he felt like his internal organs were on fire. The cultivation base of the person in front of him was so high that it was terrifying and chilling. He had already fallen to such a bleak state, yet he could still exert such combat power. It couldn't be described with just one word. Bai Yixue knew that it would be difficult for him to fight head-on, so he took a series of steps back to dissipate his energy. However, Venerable Lord Saber's saber force was incredibly dense. The saber light chased after the sword light as he fought. One retreated while the other advanced. In just a moment, they were already at the edge of the forest by the roadside. Kill! A loud roar resounded. A ray of sword light suddenly emerged from the ground. Fang Mafei was dressed in black and his face was covered. He looked like a giant dragon that had emerged from the darkness. Using the sword as a stick, he smashed it down fiercely. For an expert like Venerable Lord Saber, who was ever-changing and unfathomable, it was useless to compete with skills. He could only take advantage of the fact that his body was weak to forcefully break through. Venerable Lord Saber snorted coldly. The saber in his hand shifted slightly. A ray of saber light flew out from the body of the saber, accurately blocking Fang Mafei's sword. Not only had the saber light blocked Fang Mafei's sword stick, it had also counterattacked, leaving a deep wound on Fang Mafei's chest with a swoosh. Fresh blood spurted out at once. Fang Mafei's injury was not light, but he paid no heed to his injuries. With an angry roar, a ray of crimson light shot out from his mouth. Fealty Jade Sword Fang Mafei. Although Fang Mafei's jade sword was gone, his fealty was still there. And today, he had finally unleashed his killer move. The sudden change was beyond Venerable Lord Saber's expectations. The saber light was already out, but Bai Yixue was charging forward like a mad tiger. His sword was unleashed to its limit, like snowflakes fluttering in the air, filled with murderous intent. The crimson light that Fang Mafei had shot out had come at him from the side, and was coming at him with such speed that there was no time to react or block it. With a change of thought, Venerable Lord Saber lifted his knee abruptly and hit He Hanqing's back. At the same time, he loosened his grip, allowing He Hanqing's body to fly forward to meet the crimson light. In the face of danger, Venerable Lord Saber had pushed He Hanqing out to block the saber. Although He Hanqing was important, no matter how important he was, it was not as important as his own life at this juncture of life and death. Naturally, Venerable Lord Saber knew how to choose when to give up. At the same time, the saber light condensed again and struck Bai Yixue's sword mercilessly. Bai Yixue's body trembled as if he had been electrocuted, flying away in a crooked manner. However, Venerable Lord Saber was not at ease either. His body flew backward in the air as he opened his mouth to spit out a mouthful of blood. He felt as if thousands of drums were beating in his ears at the same time, his 5 senses and 7 orifices spitting blood at the same time. Venerable Lord Saber had divided his strength into two, taking care of both sides. His current cultivation base was no stronger than Bai Yishue's. Although he had still managed to send Bai Yishue flying away, he had suffered further damage as well. He Hanqing had already fainted. Now that he was struck by the sudden blow, he cried out in pain and regained consciousness after spitting out blood. The moment he came back to his senses, he saw a crimson light coming towards him. The speed was extremely fast. Venerable Lord Saber, you. He Hanqing understood everything at once and cursed loudly. He mustered his qi, using the last bit of his strength to struggle for life to push his body upwards. Poof! The crimson light drilled into He Hanqing's chest like a lightning bolt. He Hanqing's entire body trembled as a look of despair appeared on his face. The crimson light passed through his back and flew towards Venerable Lord Saber with unstoppable momentum. However, the saber light flashed. Clang! The crimson light spun in the air for a while before it flew back with a swoosh. Fang Mafei had already spat out a mouthful of blood as he fell to the ground. He had fallen even earlier than He Hanqing. His cultivation base was too far apart from Venerable Lord Saber's. He could no longer support himself after attacking with all his might. Bai Yishue's body floated hundreds of feet away, spitting out 3 mouthfuls of blood. His expression was weary, his combat strength diminished. Venerable Lord Saber spun in the air, the saber light turned into a whirlwind and chased after He Hanqing. His cultivation base was indeed profound. It was only a moment of respite before his combat strength was restored. The murderous intent had passed, but he still had to try to bring He Hanqing away. He Hanqing fell once again in a daze. This time, it was worse than before, he had lost his last bit of autonomy. Venerable Lord Saber's hand was about to grab hold of He Hanqing's clothes. Suddenly, a glaring saber light appeared in the air between Venerable Lord Saber and He Hanqing. The brilliance of this saber light was like a shooting star that had suddenly flashed through the galaxy. The saber's aura was overflowing with the majestic aura of Tao. Wherever the saber light passed, it was all destiny. Where the saber light was directed, there was only destiny. There was actually someone hiding in ambush. Venerable Lord Saber was shocked and immediately retracted his hand. He could feel the murderous intent in the sudden appearance of the saber light. A thought flashed through his mind as he retreated immediately. Swoosh! A sharp saber light streaked across Venerable Lord Saber's lower abdomen. A sharp pain struck his heart. Venerable Lord Saber cried out, fear rising in his eyes. What kind of saber could cut through his protective mystical qi and injure his lower abdomen? After a moment of hesitation, Venerable Lord Saber felt the pressure on his chest suddenly increase, as if his internal organs were about to rush out from the wound on his lower abdomen. Venerable Lord Saber was horrified. He hastily used a piece of cloth to bind the wound tightly. His mystical qi was channeled without a care for his life, using all of it to protect the wound. Only when he felt that his life was no longer in danger did he finally feel at ease. However, when Venerable Lord Saber raised his head to look again, he saw a saber light flashing elegantly across He Hanqing's neck. He watched with his own eyes as He Hanqing's head flew into the air and was caught by the hand of the person who had suddenly appeared. The body that had lost its head was like an empty sack, falling to the ground with a thud. Both of its broken legs were still spasming. This person had appeared out of the blue, and his attack was even more powerful than what Venerable Lord Saber had ever seen in his life. Clean and efficient. Beheaded with a single slash. He Hanqing was dead. Venerable Lord Saber's mind went blank. For so many years, this was the first time that a high-level figure like the 4 Supreme Lords of the Four Seasons Tower had died. Even when they were facing Ling Xiaozue, they had not suffered such a great loss. Now, one of the 4 Supreme Lords, Supreme Lord Spring Frost, had died in front of him. The saber light flashed again. Venerable Lord Saber could feel a sharp saber energy flying towards him. Moreover, it seemed to be locked on to him. Now that he was plagued by internal and external troubles, he was almost at the end of his rope. If he continued to stay, he might end up like Enchanting. Since the beginning of the concourse of the underworld's killing spree, they had been coming up with waves after waves of backups. Each time, it was beyond his expectations. Each time, it was stronger than the last. The last saber light had exceeded Venerable Lord Saber's understanding of the saber. Venerable Lord Saber had long lost his will to fight. Who knew if the other party had a stronger backup? Besides, Enchanting was already dead. What was the point of staying and fighting? Venerable Lord Saber let out a long howl. A saber light soared into the sky, rushing into the clouds and disappearing in a flash. A resentful voice came from afar. Concourse of the Underworld, School of Spring and Autumn. This isn't over yet. Not over yet? Yin Yang appeared from thin air and touched Enchanting's body. With a snort, he said, "Let's go." He then brought Feng Mafei and Bai Ishue with him and left swiftly. Not over yet? I'm afraid that you all want to end it here. The silhouettes of Yin Yang and the other two quickly disappeared into the forest. A moment later, the underworld fog rushed over like the wind and clouds. The 10 men from the concourse of the underworld had finally arrived. Speed was not their forte, and everything that had happened here was too fast. In the blink of an eye, everything had ended. Therefore, when the 10 of them arrived, they could only see a blurry shadow disappearing into the forest. There was only silence around them. There was also a headless corpse on the ground. The 10 men sucked in a cold breath at the sight. That corpse, this is Enchanting. King Qingguang floated down to confirm and suddenly exclaimed in shock. He was a little confused. Chapter 280. However, Enchanting's corpse was a little too tragic. His head was gone, one of his arms was gone, his lower abdomen was pierced, both his legs were broken, and his chest was pierced by a sword. There were no less than 100 other wounds on his body. The 10 Yama kings were dumbfounded. The concourse of the underworld had already sent out all its forces, yet they could not kill this ruthless character. How could he die here, and even his head was cut off? They did not even know who did it. Venerable Lord Saber was nowhere to be found. The 10 Yama kings were stunned. The 9 brothers were panting heavily, staring at each other. They all looked at their eldest brother, Emperor Song. It's good that it's Enchanting. With his corpse here, it's enough to complete the mission. Go back immediately. Emperor Song's face was solemn as he said, "This matter has come to an end, but the enmity between the concourse of the underworld and the Four Seasons Tower has also been formed. Everyone, go back and prepare yourselves. From this moment on, we will be the prey instead of the hunter. Be careful, be cautious." The other 9 brothers and the 2 gold-ranked assassins, Oxhead and Horseface, were silent. Looking at Enchanting's corpse on the ground, everyone's eyes seemed to see the storm that was about to be set off. As for the concourse of the underworld, they would definitely be at the heart of the struggle. The martial world has not had such a big turmoil for many years. I'm afraid this time. King Chujiang frowned and smiled bitterly. Let's just take today as a warm-up prelude to the martial world's turmoil. The livelier time will start tomorrow, brothers. No matter what, the brothers felt like they had just eaten a fly. There was no need to mention the nauseating taste. However, now that things had come to this, they could only pinch their noses and admit it. What else could they do but not admit it? Could they let Enchanting come back to life and let the brothers kill him again? That was impossible even if they used their buttocks to think. The wraith fog dissipated, and the world regained its clarity. Venerable Lord Saber rode the wind, his heart filled with unspeakable grievance and unspeakable anger. A mere concourse of the underworld, a mere school of spring and autumn, had actually dared to lay their hands on the Four Seasons Tower, and had even killed one of the 4 Supreme Lords, Supreme Lord Springfrost. Ever since the Four Seasons Tower existed in this world, they had never suffered such a huge loss. If this grudge was not avenged, How could the Four Seasons Tower speak of intimidating the martial world? Go back and report to boss. We can't let this matter rest. The wounds on his body were burning with pain. It was a serious injury that had almost taken away half of his life, but it was not as painful as the pain in Venerable Lord Saber's heart. How many years had it been since he had run for his life in such a pathetic manner? This was simply unimaginable. It was something he had never even dreamed of. This enmity must be avenged. Venerable Lord Saber's body disappeared into the sky like a stream of light. Venerable Lord Saber was still brooding over the sudden ambush. He swore revenge, hurried back to the Four Seasons Tower to report the news, and even planned his revenge. After all, they were going up against two powerful forces, the concourse of the underworld and the school of spring and autumn. The Four Seasons Tower was confident that they could handle any one of them with ease and victory in their grasp. However, facing two forces at the same time, even the Four Seasons Tower would feel troubled. Despite facing Yun Yang head-on and being shocked by Yun Yang's stunning saber skills, Venerable Lord Saber still did not treat Yun Yang as a third force. On one hand, it was because of Fang Mafei. Although Fang Mafei's ability was weak, his assassin's skills and tenacity were all indicative of his identity as the concourse of the underworld's gold-ranked assassin. He instinctively thought that the saber-wielding man who appeared at the end was also from the concourse of the underworld. On the other hand, it was also because of Bai Shue. Bai Shue's official identity was Han Sanhe's guard, and he had even attacked directly to assassinate He Hanqing. His comeback was not something unexpected. At least, from Venerable Lord Saber's point of view, even if Bai Shue did not belong to the empire of Dongxian, he should at least be related to the school of spring and autumn. Yun Yang and the other two waited until they returned to the residence of Yun. They still felt that everything that had happened today was like a dream. Supreme Lord Springfrost. This prominent figure in the martial world, the backbone of the Four Seasons Tower, a ruthless character who could survive when faced with Ling Xiaozui, had died just like that under Yun Yang's plot. Killing He Hanqing had been Yun Yang's dream for a long time. From the very beginning, when he knew He Hanqing's identity, Yun Yang had been planning, from plotting against Han Sanhe, he had put it on the agenda. First, it was Bai Shue who was unintentionally targeted by Yun Yang. Then, it was the concourse of the underworld's first court King Qingguang who had snuck in and accepted the mission. Then, Yun Yang had spent a lot of effort to trap Wei Xinglu. At that time, he did not think too much about it. He just wanted to solve his own crisis first. However, by coincidence, the concourse of the underworld had made their move at this time. Yun Yang noticed it immediately and informed Wei Xinglu to send the sound over with a blast. It seemed to be a coincidence in every aspect, but without Yun Yang's careful planning, such a coincidence would never have happened. The moment the divine edge chopped off He Hanqing's head, Yun Yang clearly felt that his brothers were looking at him with a smile. OL 9th, well done. Whether the feeling at that moment was real or imaginary, Yun Yang treated the feeling as real. However, there was not much relief in Yun Yang's heart at this moment. Instead, it was filled with an indescribable bitterness and discomfort. Brothers, I have finally gotten rid of a great enemy. He's our common enemy. However, what happened today is only a beginning, a prelude. Next, I will find out all the people who had a hand in dealing with us that day and carefully settle the debts they owe us. The debt of human lives must be paid with human lives. Although Yun Yang and the other two had successfully killed He Hanqing in this battle, Fang Mafei and Bai Shue had also suffered injuries of varying degrees, but they were not serious. Returning to the residence of Yun, each of them went into closed-door cultivation to recuperate and would recover after a few days. Yun Yang tossed He Hanqing's head and all the items he had found on him into the secret chamber before he hurried out of it. The clear moonlight hung diagonally in the sky. There was already a faint glimmer of light in the east. The entire heaven and earth had become a little misty. It was already dawn. Yun Yang sat under the flowering tree, quietly boiling a pot of water. The steam rose in spirals. Beside his hand was a cup of leftover tea from last night. Yin Yang was dressed in a spotless purple robe. There seemed to be a hint of melancholy shrouding his handsome brows. He sat quietly, not making a single sound. The boiling water splashed against the lid of the teapot, but he did not seem to hear it. All in all, he looked like he was burdened with worries. Of course, such an act was done for some people. It had to be said that if Yin Yang were to transmigrate to reality, he would definitely be an international actor. After a while, the wind suddenly changed. In the sky, a huge shadow swooped down towards the residence of Yun. Yin Yang did not get up, but turned his head to look at the source of the sound. The black eagle was surrounded by a strong gust of wind as it landed in the yard, stirring up the dust on the ground. Wei Xinglu and Gugu leaped down from the back of the black eagle. Yin Yang saw that it was them but did not make any further moves. He turned back to the bubbling teapot in a daze, as if he did not notice their arrival. It was just that his gaze seemed to have stiffened a little. With a sweep of his deific consciousness, Wei Xinglu realized that Yin Yang had not slept at all. It seemed that he had been sitting under the flowering tree. Could it be that he had been sitting for the whole night? Looking from afar, one could see that the youth under the flowering tree was filled with worry. It was difficult to hide the heaviness in his heart. It was as if he was isolated from the world, causing people to involuntarily have a subtle feeling of wanting to protect him. Even Gugu, who had always been at odds with Yin Yang, could not help but feel a slight shock in her heart. He was actually still awake at this time and was still waiting here. What was he waiting for? Everyone else was at home except for the two of them. Could it be that he was waiting for them? Wei Xinglu naturally thought so too. Seeing such deep feelings right in front of him, he could not help but sigh softly. His body floated slowly as he walked in. Yin Yang still had no reaction. His eyes were still fixed on the teapot, as if the bubbling boiling water had attracted all his attention. "Brother Yun," Wei Xinglu said with a sigh, "looking at you, you didn't sleep for the whole night? Could it be that something happened that made you stay up all night?" Yin Yang's body trembled, as if he was shocked. He turned his head abruptly, and a smile immediately appeared on his face. "Eldest senior brother, you are back." It was a strange feeling of relief. This feeling was exceptionally clear. Yin Yang's face was full of dew and frost from the night. Even his sideburns had long been wet with dew. No matter how one looked at him, there was an indescribable sense of exhaustion. "What important matter made you stay up all night?" Wei Xinglu frowned. At this moment, the eldest senior brother was full of heartache. Although Yin Yang was smart, had a tough personality, and was shrewd, he was still a child who was not even 20 years old. In terms of the ways of the world, there was always a hint of childishness, whether intentionally or unintentionally. However, it was this childishness that made Wei Xinglu feel comforted. A cultivator who had not lost the innocence of a child was rare, extremely rare. Yin Yang smiled. "Eldest senior brother, you must be joking. I have had a good sleep, and my spirit is exceptionally good. I just woke up, and since I have nothing to do, I plan to boil a pot of tea to drink." Gugu took advantage of Yin Yang's precarious situation. How could she not step on Yin Yang when there was such a rare opportunity? She sneered, "Just woke up. Such a big pot of water has already been boiled dry. Could it be that you boiled the water while sleepwalking? Boiled the tea?" Yin Yang was stunned for a moment. He picked up the teapot and said with some embarrassment, "Maybe I poured myself too quickly just now, and drank half of the pot unknowingly. I like to drink hot tea." Wei Xinglu smiled. He looked more carefully than Gugu. How could he not see that the tea leaves in Yin Yang's cup had obviously been boiled until there was no color at all? To be in such a state, the tea must have been boiled at least 10 times. Otherwise, how could it be so colorless and fragrant? Moreover, the pot of water was obviously boiled dry. Inferring from such a time, this young Master Yun must have been sitting here since last night, drinking tea while waiting. drinking tea until it was colorless, waiting until the sky brightened. The night dew and frost, the dawn breeze and waning moon. Sitting alone, both body and mind were silent. Chapter 281. The morning dew is heavy. Drinking tea at this time is not good for the body. Let's go into the house and rest for a while. Wei Xinglu did not continue but urged him instead. It's all right, really. Yin Yang smiled. You guys have been busy the whole night. Let's go to bed and rest. I had a good night's sleep and drank a lot of tea. Now I'm full of energy. I'm going to practice some boxing and martial arts later. How can I let such a beautiful day go to waste? As he spoke, he stood up with a smile as if he was going to walk forward. However, when he stood up suddenly, his legs trembled and he almost sat back down. It was as if his legs had gone numb after sitting for the whole night. However, he straightened his legs immediately and stood straight. However, his bones involuntarily made a cracking sound. Wei Xinglu said gently, "We're back now and won't go out again. Let's all rest for a while. Shall we meet again in the afternoon?" Yes, yes. Yin Yang rubbed his hands together, behaving like an innocent young man. Wei Xinglu pulled Gugu along and left. Since Wei Xinglu's comforting words, Gugu had not said a word. As the two of them walked forward slowly, a low sound came from behind them. It was a sigh of relief. Gugu, can you see it? Wei Xinglu asked in a low voice. What? Gugu's voice was also very low. He didn't sleep the whole night. He's been drinking tea and waiting for us. His tea has long lost its color and fragrance. Such a tea, even if it was brewed a dozen times, it might not be able to reach this level. To drink a pot of tea to this extent, it must have been brewed for at least 6 hours or more. There's also that pot of water. The pot should have been full of boiling water. No one uses half a pot to boil water. It's even more so for tea. But now there's only the bottom of the pot left. He didn't even notice it. Obviously, this pot of water has been boiling for at least 2 hours. Luckily, the fire used to brew tea can't be too strong. Otherwise, the pot would have burned through long ago. He's been thinking about something. Wei Xinglu's gaze was thoughtful as he looked at Gugu. Tell me, why didn't he sleep the whole night? Gugu lowered her head, not saying a word. Obviously, he was waiting for us. To be more precise, he was waiting for you. He was worried about your safety. I never thought that he Hanqing was not only a top-notch powerhouse himself, but he also had experts who were stronger than him by his side. Luckily, we had the 10 Yama kings of the concourse of the underworld with us. Otherwise, how could we have resisted? Wei Xinglu said solemnly, how could Yun Yang not know that he Hanqing has made such a big commotion tonight? I think Yun Yang must have some understanding of he Hanqing's ability, that's why he's so worried. When he saw you come back just now and confirmed that you're safe, he was relieved. When he stood up, he almost fell down and his bones cracked. Clearly, he had been sitting there in a daze, thinking about something. Think about it, he is a martial artist, and his cultivation is extraordinary. He has a much stronger endurance than ordinary people. To make such a martial artist's bones crack, how long did he have to sit there without moving? But when you came back, he moved and stood up. Wei Xinglu sighed. What's more difficult is that he refused to admit it. He kept saying that he only woke up after a good night's sleep. Look at the weathered look on his face, where did it look like he had slept at all? Why didn't he admit it? Gugu asked in a low voice. Silly girl, why would you ask such a question? Where's the usual eccentric spirit? He's obviously afraid of adding to the burden in your heart. Wei Xinglu heaved a long sigh. Such a sentimental man is rare in this world. Gugu lowered her head and did not speak again. Wei Xinglu said softly, Gugu, I want to tell you something, very seriously. Eldest senior brother, what did you say? Gugu's voice sounded like she was talking in a dream. If in the future. Wei Xinglu said softly, if you can't be together in the future, then, at least don't hurt him too deeply. This child is very good, very good. Gugu was silent. Surprisingly, she did not retort. In the afternoon, Wei Xinglu and Gugu packed their luggage and walked out. Young Master Yun, we will be leaving now. Thank you for your hospitality these few days. If you have the time to visit the Empire of Dongxian, you must come to the School of Spring and Autumn for a visit. We brothers and sisters will welcome you with open arms. Yin Yang's face was calm as he said with a smile, eldest senior brother, Gugu, have a safe journey. Take care. Gugu turned around and stood aside, not saying a word. Wei Xinglu sighed and said, young Master Yun, take care too. Remember to visit our school as a guest. He wanted to say, don't worry, your sir, he is no longer a threat to us. At best, he would be seriously injured and dying. He would not have the energy or mood to chase after us. Wei Xinglu was also injured in the battle last night. He had left very early and did not confirm He Hanqing's death like the concourse of the underworld. He only thought that He Hanqing had been taken away by Venerable Lord Saber. Although he was seriously injured, he was not dead. However, when Wei Xinglu thought about it, he realized that he should never say this. As far as the current standpoint was concerned, He Hanqing was an old minister of the Empire of Yutong, a great scholar for 3 generations. Yin Yang also contributed to the Empire of Yutong. Both of them were actually standing on the same side. If he were to really say this, it would not only cause a great blow to Yin Yang, but it might also destroy the harmonious atmosphere between both parties. After all, He Hanqing's injury was largely due to Wei Xinglu. At this time, it was better not to use the truth to provoke Yin Yang. Wei Xinglu was very sure that Yin Yang was the kind of person who could easily abandon his personal feelings for the sake of his standpoint and his country. The accident of the soul-sealing spike the day before was because of this. Therefore, it was better not to say this. Gugu, if you have anything to say to young Master Yun, do it now. You don't know when you will come to Yutong next time. Wei Xinglu urged with a smile. He was very observant as he brought the eagle and slowly walked to the side. Yin Yang looked at Gugu with a warm smile on his face. Gugu turned around and said softly and coldly, Yin Yang, we shall meet again. Yin Yang smiled, from now on, the journey of the martial world is long. You must take good care of yourself. Gugu's future will surely be above the clouds of the 9 heavens. Yin Yang will wait with a cup of wine. The day when your name spreads across the world and you become a legend, I will definitely raise my cup to celebrate and drink with you. Gugu snorted and said, who cares? Yin Yang laughed and said, it's fate that we meet in this world, and it's also fate that we get together. This farewell, take care. Forgive me for not seeing you off. With a wave of his hand, Lao Mei came out with a parcel. Yin Yang smiled and said, just some food, it's not enough to be a token of my respect, and it's not worthy of both of your attention. But please accept it. I've offended you in the past, and it's fortunate that we'll part ways from now on. We'll meet again in the indefinite future. Gugu, if you still mind, just treat it as a nightmare. Yin Yang has been impetuous before, I apologize here. He cupped his fists together, his expression indescribably calm and carefree. It was as if he did not care about this farewell at all. He was extremely generous. Who wants your things? Since you know it's unsightly, why do you have to embarrass yourself in front of others? Gugu did not know why, but she felt a little uncomfortable in her heart. She glared at him coldly and turned to leave before her voice echoed in the air. Yin Yang smiled bitterly, his face full of bitterness. A hand stretched over and took the parcel. Wei Xinglu laughed and said, this journey is long, and I was still worried about where to find food along the way. Brother Yun is thoughtful. Anyway, I'll accept it without hesitation. Brother Yun, the mountains are high and the rivers are long. We'll definitely meet again. If you have time in the future, you must come to the Twin Poles Mountain, the school of spring and autumn. I'll be waiting for you at any time. Yin Yang sucked in a deep breath and resumed the warm smile on his face. However, it was inevitably a little stiff, as if he was wearing a smiling mask. He cupped his fists and said, I, Yin Yang, will definitely pay a visit to your honorable school. Have a safe journey, both of you. Farewell. Wei Xinglu cupped his fists together and pulled Gugu's hand, leaping onto the back of the eagle. Following a loud eagle's cry, a strong gust of wind blew in all directions. The eagle soared into the sky and soared upwards. Gugu and Wei Xinglu looked down from the eagle's back. Through the eagle's wings, they saw Yin Yang, who seemed to have chased for 2 steps before he stopped abruptly. He lifted his neck and looked at the sky, his eyes filled with reluctance. The black eagle flew higher and higher. Yin Yang had already become a small black dot, almost invisible. His body seemed to sway a little before he sat down on the ground. Clouds and mist floated past them coincidentally, blocking their line of sight. They could no longer see each other. Wei Xinglu looked down and sighed softly. He has thought it through. Gugu bit her lips and did not say a word. She twisted her neck and looked to the other side, remaining silent for a while. After a long time, in the high north wind, she asked softly, what has he thought through? Wei Xinglu sighed and said, before he left, didn't he say that your future is above the clouds of the 9th heaven? He also said that it's fate that we meet in this world. He even said that after this farewell, we'll never meet again. Gugu bit her lips and said, aren't these just polite words to bid farewell? Wei Xinglu laughed and said, polite words? If it's an ordinary person, these are indeed polite words. But who are you? You're the school of spring and autumn's gifted disciple, destined to be above all. He has realized this. As a guest in the secular world, he and the high and mighty heaven's favored daughter are people from 2 different worlds. Even if you're in the same secular world, you're in 2 hostile countries. No matter how you look at it, it's impossible for the both of you to be together. That's why he said that. Gugu, I'm afraid you can't imagine how upset he was when he said that. Wei Xinglu's eyes looked at the void in a daze. At this moment, he suddenly recalled some distant past events and felt a sudden pang of sadness. What was he upset about? I saw him smiling all the time. His face was calm, like he was relieved of a burden and couldn't wait for me to leave. Gugu snorted. You don't understand. You don't understand a man's heart. Girl, when you understand, you will. He wanted to say that she would feel very upset and sour inside. However, he thought about it and did not say it out loud. Chapter 282. Wei Xinglu said softly, the reason why he acted like that was because he was afraid that you would be upset. That's why he pretended to be calm. Didn't you see that after we flew into the sky, he sat down on the ground? That's because the power that supported him has been used up. He really can't control his emotions. How can a powerful practitioner fall to the ground for no reason? Don't tell me you didn't feel it at all. Gugu bit her lip, almost to the point of bleeding, but she still said stubbornly, it's a good thing that he knows his place. We're from 2 different worlds. Even if he's delusional, what's the use? Wei Xinglu chuckled bitterly. Little girl, you're so stubborn. Do you really think I can't see that you're upset? Thus, he stopped talking. Along the way, Gugu sat on the hawk's back, motionless and silent all the way. The hawk pierced through the clouds and flew towards the empire of Dongxian like a sharp arrow. They're finally gone. Yin Yang, who looked extremely dispirited, sprung up from the ground and guffawed, I'm so tired these few days. My face is stiff from all the smiling. Lao Mei chuckled and said, but young master's acting these few days is indeed very useful. You killed the enemy and borrowed their strength to fight them. If it wasn't for Wei Xinglu's unexpected help, I'm afraid it would be difficult to successfully eliminate He Hanqing. Yin Yang smiled faintly and said, this is really a coincidence. I didn't include him in the killing plan, but without his participation, it would be really difficult to take down Supreme Lord Springfrost. I'm afraid there's a follow-up between these two. I saw that Lady Gugu's attitude towards young master had obviously changed a lot when she left just now. Lao Mei sighed softly and said. Yin Yang kept quiet for a while and said, there's no way to think about what to do next now. Although we've killed He Hanqing now, the internal and external troubles haven't improved much. The School of Spring and Autumn is also a colossus that we can't afford to offend. If it were according to my previous personality, this time, it would definitely be a stalemate. Once the situation gets out of control, it'll be out of control. Even if we can kill them here, we won't be able to keep the eagle. The School of Spring and Autumn's revenge will come one after another, and will be completely exposed. The School of Spring and Autumn alone won't be able to handle it. What's more, there's still the Four Seasons Tower eyeing us. We're not completely flawless in the past. Any hint of association can lead to countless follow-up events. I don't have enough strength right now, so I can only use this trick to make myself safer. Yin Yang said faintly, I'm afraid there's still a long way to go. Lao Mei nodded, but he sighed in his heart. Young master, what you've done has helped you overcome a crisis and successfully used the opponent's martial arts to achieve your goal. However, you've also touched the heart of a young girl. Don't tell me you don't feel anything? If Lady Gugu had been hating Yin Yang from the beginning, it would not have been a big deal. But if by any chance, to this young lady, it would be an extremely cruel matter. Lao Mei kept these words in his heart and did not say them out loud. Perhaps, the young master did not mind this at all. After all, both of them were completely different in terms of identity, background, and stance. The chances of them being together were extremely rare, almost negligible. This sentiment could only be left to time. It had to be said that Lao Mei's thoughts were exactly the same as eldest senior brother Wei's. Yin Yang returned to the flowering tree and brewed a pot of tea. He boiled the water slowly and watched the steam rise with a calm smile on his face. The flowering tree was green and dotted with red flowers. The shadows of the tree swayed with the wind, the fragrance of the flowers wafting and the fragrance of the tea lingering in the air. The young master was like jade, his purple robe fluttering. He was like a man in a painting. Lao Mei watched for a while before he finally sighed and went about his own business. Sensing that Lao Mei had left, Yin Yang slumped to the ground in an indolent manner, watching the water bubbling and boiling. He recalled Gugu's unusual silence before she left, and sighed softly and leisurely. Night fell. A gust of eerie ghastly fog entered the residence of Yun soundlessly. As Yin Yang brewed the tea and waited, a silhouette in hemp garments and a tall crown appeared before him as if it had appeared out of thin air. First Court King Qingguang. He had finally arrived. What should come would eventually come. The mission was set and completed. It was time to end this matter. Yin Yang could not help but chuckle when the ghastly fog appeared. Yin Yang could not help but chuckle at such a unique entrance. It was too obvious. It also highlighted the other party's identity. To someone who was used to the eerie atmosphere, the ghastly fog was only vague and transparent, nothing more. Moreover, the owner of this ghastly fog had brought him good news. What are you laughing at? Do you know that you're about to be doomed? First Court King Qingguang said coldly with a dark expression. He and his brothers had put in a lot of effort this time, especially himself. He had risked his life and almost lost his life just to work for this child. Finally, when everyone was half dead from exhaustion, this guy appeared by himself, cut off the target's head, and took it away. What the F***ck was this? Was this still considered as a completed mission? Although First Court King Qingguang did not see who had killed He Hanqing in the end, he could confirm that the one who had killed He Hanqing was Yin Yang himself based on such an elusive and untraceable method. There was no need to even think about it. Furthermore, Emperor Song, who was the most meticulous and observant, had pointed out straightforwardly that a gold-ranked assassin from the concourse of the underworld was suspected to have contributed to the last wave of attack. Other than the concourse of the underworld's headquarters, only Yun Yang had a former gold-ranked assassin from the concourse of the underworld by his side. In other words, the Four Seasons Tower might very well determine that the one who had taken the life was still the concourse of the underworld's men based on this. Although this did not go against the concourse of the underworld's original intention, it was still a scapegoat for someone else. The feeling of being the scapegoat and being the scapegoat for someone else was different. It was not a good feeling at all. As the person in charge of this mission, First Court King Qingguang was infuriated when he saw Yun Yang's handsome grin despite having gotten what he deserved, so he mocked him immediately. Seeing that you're here, I know that you've completed your mission. How can I not be happy that I've gotten rid of a major threat? Yun Yang was gentle and refined, but it only made him angrier. First Court King Qingguang's expression darkened further. He Hanqing is dead, First Court King Qingguang said with a snort. The mission had been completed, but the routine report was still necessary. This was the main purpose of today's trip. I know. Yin Yang said, his head is in my secret chamber now. Although I'm the one who beheaded him in the end, without the concourse of the underworld's all-out effort and the arrival of 10 Yama kings, this plan wouldn't have succeeded. I owe you a favor. First Court King Qingguang said, so, the deal between both parties has been confirmed and completed. Other than explaining this to you, I'm also bidding you farewell. We have to rush back to the concourse of the underworld to arrange the follow-up. Yin Yang said, it's not too late to bid farewell later. I believe that everything in He Hanqing's residence, including the items in the secret chamber, must be in your hands. First Court King Qingguang rolled his eyes and said, the most valuable item that He Hanqing carried with him has fallen into your hands. Why are you still concerned about the details? Are you really so poor that you've gone mad? Yin Yang chuckled. Not so poor that I've gone mad. How about I buy those items from you at a high price? First Court King Qingguang snorted and said, what high price can a pauper like you offer? It's just a few items, we'll give them to you. Why are you so generous? Yin Yang was genuinely surprised this time. In Yin Yang's mind, the worst that could happen was that the concourse of the underworld would condemn him forcefully after confirming that the mission had been completed. It was not impossible for them to gang up on him and kill him. After all, the concourse of the underworld could very well guess his identity. The concourse of the underworld had thoroughly offended the Four Seasons Tower this time, but with the 9 Supreme Cloud's life as compensation and the fact that they had been tricked, they could completely erase the grudge between them and the Four Seasons Tower. Not only did they not condemn them, they were even willing to give their gains to them for free. This transaction of theirs would be a huge loss. Although Yin Yang was a black-hearted gigolo, his skin was as thick as a city wall, he was still filled with suspicion. I only hope that you'll be merciful. Don't assign such a deceptive mission to us in the future. First Court King Qingguang rolled his eyes. Yin Yang chuckled. Inwardly, he heaved a sigh of relief. He Hanqing's belongings were very important to him. It was good enough that they were willing to return them. However, it was a little strange. How could the murderous concourse of the underworld be so easy to talk to? They were actually willing to give them to him for free. Yun Yang could not wrap his head around this. No matter how he thought about it, it did not make sense. These fellows were simply trying to help him. Could it be that they had taken a liking to him and cherished him, just like what that fellow had said? Thinking of this, Yun Yang shuddered and said quickly, let's have a pleasant cooperation this time. I'll pay you the rest of the silver taels immediately. There's no need for the rest as well. First Court King Qingguang said, after all, we didn't kill He Hanqing in the end. It's better that you keep the silver taels. Yin Yang was even more bewildered. An assassin's organization that accepted money in exchange for one's life was the most classic example of wanting money over life. Now, they did not even want the silver taels that they were supposed to receive. It was strange no matter how he looked at it. Yin Yang, I know that you're surprised. We're already very angry about this matter. First Court King Qingguang said unhappily, targeting such high-end figures with hidden identities has made us very passive. Yin Yang said with a grin, "You can't blame me for this, can you?" First Court King Qingguang was speechless. "Not blame you? You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.